All right, I have 7:02. I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. Will the recorder please call the roll?
Counselor Irvin,
Here.
Counselor Lammerman,
Here.
Counselor Settermeyer,
Here.
You raise
Well,
his
we could read
hand.
your lips, Counselor Settermeyer, but we didn't hear any sound.
we'll mark him as here. Mayor Soulsby,
Here.
Counselor Hank,
Here.
Counselor Merryday,
Here.
Counselor Wilson.
All rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. We have a presentation tonight that is really special to the city of Cottage Grove. It is a sad but celebratory time for our finance director, Bert Likens. She is retiring with 46 years with the city of Cottage Grove. I'm sorry. 46 years in public service. I'm sorry, 20 with Cottage Grove. And we want to extend our appreciation. We will miss you greatly, Bert, and we want you to have the best retirement and enjoy your family. It's well deserved. Thank you for your many years of hard work and dedicated service. All right. Item B, community sharing request for approval to construct emergency shelters. Community sharing executive director, Mr. Fleck.
You think I'd remember that? Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Mike Fleck. I'm Executive Director of Community Sharing in Cottage Grove.
Mr. Fleck, could you speak into the microphone a little
Sorry.
closer for the audience? Thank you.
And 1440 Birch Avenue is our address. So I have a proposal for you folks. So basically, Community Sharing stepped up to offer a warming shelter after Beds for Freezing Nights announced that they would not be active this year. We believe this is a critical service needed in our community to prevent our unhoused neighbors suffering extremely cold nights outside. As an example, it was 18 degrees out one of the mornings I went to the shelter to clean up. Beds for Freezing Nights has since indicated that they are dissolving. So we are making warming shelters a regular program of community sharing going forward. We have no funding to operate this program, so we will be working on a bare bones service with exclusively volunteer support. This is the 4th year we've operated a warming shelter, and we've had very few problems over the years because we have strict expectations of our guests. I understand the concerns of folks in the concerns of folks in our community based on our past experiences with shelters, but our shelters have not been some of those unfortunate experiences. I ask the police chief how often he's had to come to our agency to deal with issues of concern to the community. We take managing behavior seriously, and we'll take all actions necessary to keep our volunteers, other clients, and the community safe. That said, We work hard to provide a welcoming environment, and we've had very few problems. Our clients are very appreciative of our program. So far this year, our warming shelter operated 9 nights, serving 28 unduplicated individuals for a total of 95 shelter stays. So some were there many nights, others just a few. But that was just in starting from the 25th of January. So it was very, very cold. Unfortunately, we started about a week into this. We started operating out of our office space, which is not ideal. Our office space is really small. Basically, we have mostly rooms that are 9 by 9, 9 by 10, and we're using 4 of those with cots set up in them. It's not ideal. Our carpeting saw some spills. There are reasons that we want to try to get a more permanent and viable solution. The letter I submitted mentions warming with emergency in brackets shelter. This is to reflect the ORS that we're applying under. If you look at what I've posted, and this is basically, I basically just wordsmithed the one that our city did when they originally did the 99 site. So I basically changed that language to fit our circumstance. And under that, the ORS calls it emergency shelter. It does not talk about warming specifically. That said, warming is exactly what we're looking to do. I did notice or heard from folks on social media, there's concern about doing full-time shelter work. At this point, it's not in our wheelhouse. We certainly do not have any funding. And my board is really not in support of doing any sort of full-time sheltering at our location. Let me go on from there. We're asking for the transfer of ownership of 12 small pallet shelters and 1 large pallet shelter. The county gave those to the city for the purpose of operating shelters for community members without housing. We would like to help the city meet that donor intent by operating a warming shelter at our property with these units. Community sharing is not asking the city for any money. We will put in the infrastructure ourselves, which will include trenching, electrical work, and the purchase of a large canopy. We will dip into reserves to make this happen. This is a significant investment, which is why we're asking the city to give us the shelters. The only request we have is to ask for the help of the public work folks moving and setting up the shelters. At this point, I think I've given you guys a lot of the background. I have more details I can provide, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions? Counselor Hink?
My biggest question, thank you. How have you engaged with your neighbors regarding this plan or proposal?
So community sharing is operated out of that site for, I was not there, but I believe in 2007, we began working out of that location. Like I said, we just have very few problems. We're really good at working with folks who are having challenges. We take mandatory trainings year in, year out to work with folks in conflict resolution and other things. Like I said, on rare occasion, I'm trying to think, I think in my 14 years I've been director, I've actually dialed 911 3 times. The chief can check me on that, but that's what it seems like to me. So it's pretty rare. We're really good about this, and we don't have, any issues out there. That said, I do not reach out explicitly to the neighbors. I certainly would field any questions they had or answer and work with them to problem solve any problems.
So to piggyback on that, you have not reached out to the community at all to find out how they feel about doing this?
No.
No.
No, the parcel that we sit on is an RC zone, residential commercial. Community services, social services is an outright permitted use on that property. It has been for many, many years. That being said, with land use being the way it is, we've opted to go under the ORS that's cited here, which allows for sheltering on that property.
But with what our city has just been through with
get
the camps in general, you didn't think that it should be put out at least to the community to alleviate any misgivings or issues to get ahead of it a little bit? You didn't think that that would be a good place, jumping off point?
So I guess the challenge is we were not operating those locations. When we have operated shelters, we've had very few issues. In fact, I can only remember one time where somebody was taken away from the pallet shelters when they were at 12th Street. You know, it's been so controversial that stirring the pot, we activated 9 times without a single problem in our neighborhood. This is the exact same thing we're planning to do. Instead of in our office, we're planning on doing it in pallet shelters or another option should those not work out. And so, no, we're just hoping to utilize them because that would be advantageous to our process. But this is a needed service and something that we intend to do.
Any other questions? Counselor Hink?
I get concerned when I hear words or phrases like at this point. At this point, we don't have plans to expand the services. What does that mean at this point?
That means that we're not a shelter provider. So this is not, and to be honest, none of the times we've operated shelters were our plans to expand our footprint. Basically, what happened is during COVID, Beds for Freezing Nights had typically operated out of churches, which were congregate settings, and COVID wouldn't allow that. So we actually put together the shelters. The city had installed the fencing and the power at 12th Street, and we operated those shelters for 2 years. That was a different model. We actually had money from the state during that to operate with paid staff. And so second year, I think we are amount of funding was $67,000 or $68,000 that we ended up with mostly wages and other expenses. We have no funding, and we're not a shelter provider. My hope would be that St. Vincent de Paul or somebody else who has that expertise will come into town. What we're trying to do is keep the most vulnerable in our town warm on the coldest nights. That's it. There's been some talk about, would we also do cooling in the summer? I can't say to that. I have no idea if we'd have volunteers or not, but it'd be the same sort of extreme weather type of situation. That's the only other alternative I could see at this point. It's not in our mission, as I heard earlier from some. That's really not the direction that we go. Our focus is prevention, not sheltering. So prevention is, you know, food boxes, it's rent assistance, it's energy assistance. I mean, this is designed to help keep people in housing. There are other experts that are involved in sheltering, and that's really not our focus.
Counselor Wilson?
Yes, Mr. Fleck. Now I'm not sure if you were aware that the organization, the Beds for Freezing I can't remember the exact
Beds for
title.
Freezing Nights.
Beds for Freezing Nights. I did happen to have a conversation with one of the board members, and they were not in favor of your proposal, mainly on the ORS guidelines in the 197-783 and the subsections F will not pose any unreasonable risk to public health or safety. My concern, you're saying that it's just will only be operated as a warming and not as just
Correct.
is it going to be a fenced in area?
It already is.
Okay, so that when they go in, they're not coming back out until
No,
the
if
morning,
folks,
or they can come and go. Is there any limitation as to who comes in? Is it a low barrier situation, high barrier situation? What is that?
So our
Understand.
manual states that if you decide you want to leave, that you cannot come back. So basically, folks can come in. Our manual is a hybrid between what Beds for Freezing Nights used to do and our original one, which was based off of Egan. And so it's very similar to both of those programs. But no, it's a fenced in area. Folks can check in. Occasionally, folks do get a temporary ban for behavior. So that would be the only time they wouldn't be allowed to come in unless they're actually on a trespass list from our agency from other behaviors. So anyway, otherwise folks are able to come in. They can check in, stay. In this event, they would check their bags in. They're not allowed to take their bags with them. And then they would be able to stay the night, eat, stay warm. We typically have a common area because not everybody wants to lay down and sleep. Some may want to sit up and talk. And so that's where we keep things quiet in a common area. Right now is in our office.
Mr. Wilson.
Okay, so following up, you're basing your commentary basically on what's happening now inside your facility. Okay, this is not going to be inside your facility. This is going to be outside.
Right.
And so you're going to have staff outside there as well.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yeah, so if you look at the diagram I gave you, basically what I'm proposing is having a circle where all of it's visible. And so the first big unit from the sidewalk will actually be the office. And so this is where people will check in. This is where people will put their bags to store them so that they will stay there. If they had medications or something that they needed, they could come and ask to get those out in the presence of a volunteer. And if they're wanting to check out, they'd be willing to take them, but they would not be able to take those into their room with them.
Okay. And there will be lights
There
out
are,
there.
currently lights and there are cameras all over the property.
Okay.
I think I have 30 some odd cameras around the agency.
Thank you.
Counselor Flack, or Counselor Flack.
Former
Mr.
Counselor
Fleck.
Fleck, yes.
Going back to remind the community of the history of the pallet shelters. When we first purchased the pallet shelters,
No, the county purchased
well,
them.
the county purchased them. And when we first received them, well, the first
No, the
group,
county purchased all of them.
yeah, the second tranche of pallet shelters, right? We had two.
I don't know all the details, but I have the agreements here that just say that they were being transferred to the city, that the
Uh-huh.
county had them, and they did come in two. Well, there were three agreements,
Well,
then
the
the first
first-
agreement was replaced by the second agreement for the same,
The first was COVID.
yeah, the first few
money, ARPA money.
And there were
And
18
then
of those
we
and then
acquired
another
some
15
from the
of them.
county. It was, to my understanding, when I had a meeting with Richard Myers, it was for emergency. Because I had heard that he wanted to do a permanent homeless shelter with them. And so I set up a meeting with him and he said, no, that was not his intention. It was during the Mackenzie fire. And he said that in case we had a fire, that was the first tranche of pallets, that if we had a fire, that we could house any kind of emergency, we could house our citizens in them. And so that sounded reasonable to me. And I thought that would be a good use for our city. And so when it went into Beds for Freezing Nights, I thought that's great. And that it would be, we'd operate under when it got down to a certain freezing temperature that we would open. And I actually said to you, Mr. Flack, that, to the council, that I wanted to make sure that we did not open if Eugene was not opening, because my concern is that Eugene would say, we're not open, but Cottage Grove is. Go down to Cottage Grove. And there is a system called 211 that will transport people to Cottage Grove. And so that is still in play now.
211 is just a
211.
referral. That's a referral service. They don't actually provide any transportation. And I'm sorry, I don't mean to disagree with you, but I know that we had a memorandum of understanding that I can find with the city to operate the warming shelters. And that, to my knowledge, was when those were purchased. So I guess I'm
You
just
might
not
want to check on that
following-
because I distinctively remember it was during the Mackenzie fires.
Yeah, I do
And
have.
that was what he
MOU.
compared it to, is that we could use it in case
Okay.
of any kind of emergency like that.
Okay.
And so
I'm not sure how, because we didn't have air conditioners with the first batch. Those came later.
we
with
put
the
them
second.
in, right,
Right,
exactly.
that came in with the second
Exactly.
batch. So we only had them for heating in the first round.
Well, regardless, it was at that time and it was for emergency services for Cottage Grove. And so I
Sure.
wanted to make sure that it was used for the citizens of Cottage Grove.
Okay.
And so then it was said that if Eugene didn't open, we would not open either. But the
Mhm.
very first night that community sharing ran, we opened, Eugene didn't.
And yet we didn't have any additional folks coming to it. In fact, this last 9 episodes, we also did not follow Egan for operating because our weather's different. Eugene and Cottage Grove.
And so that
are
is
very
what you're
different.
saying is that they
Mhm.
will not correlate. So if Eugene is closed, Cottage Grove could still open.
To capacity. I mean, obviously, if you're, that is a fear, sure. I don't disagree with that. But if we hit capacity, we would have to turn folks away. So that is a limiting factor. My guess is that folks won't want to come down from Eugene with the risk of not being able to find a bed. And to be honest, the services in Eugene and Springfield are much greater than we have down here. So I really don't think that that's a concern.
Any other questions? Counselor Lammerman.
Madam Mayor, Council, thank you. Mr. Pleck, first of all, thanks for coming down and presenting this to us. Couple quick questions. So you previously worked for Beds for Freezing Nights.
No.
You
I-
did you
I
work
work-
with them?
No, I work for community sharing. I've never worked for Beds for Freezing Nights.
Did you work with them though?
So they became volunteers of our organization 2 years ago because they hadn't fundraised. And so they came in under our insurance umbrella because our insurance already covered that work. And so there was no additional expense to doing that. So yes, that first year after the pallet shelters, we did coordinate together, but BFN as volunteers of our agency.
Why did that partnership cease?
It didn't actually cease. There was a choice by the board the next year not to operate. They basically had reached out for volunteers early in this current year. Were not able to garner the volunteer support necessary. I just made an effort and was able to get enough folks in there. And, and part of the difference is I'm willing to spend the night if I have to, to cover shifts. So, I think our capacity is a little different.
Okay, and then you just mentioned volunteers. There's been a struggle to get volunteers for the previous warming shelters. How are you going to get volunteers for this next endeavor if it happens to go that way, to make sure there's people for that?
I was gonna say, we have a lot of them in the room.
Okay.
So we.
Thank you.
We have 30, I don't, the exact number, I'm going to say roughly 35 people who've signed up to volunteer in one capacity or another.
Okay.
There's some that are just doing laundry, setup and cleanup, but most are doing shifts. We activated every time this year, once we got started, when the weather was cold enough. And so we did not miss any days because we were short volunteers.
And then reading your proposal, we see the term emergency used quite a bit. I understand what the definite definition is with the ORS, but what is your definition of emergency?
Well, it's under 30 degrees, so it's 29 degrees or colder. And that's basically, it's a little bit of a convoluted process, but we look out 3 days for the weather predictions. And if it looks like it's going to be cold, we'll go on standby. If it remains cold, we will ultimately activate, assuming that we do have the volunteers to do so. Once again, every time this time we do. So this is what we're proposing. And that's it. Like I said, you also have to look at the capacity of our agency. I know that there's a lot of fear around sheltering. Said, hey, I get it. You know, this was not ideal. You know, that was not what I envisioned or I think anybody else that was on that council when I was there. So I get the frustration. That is not me. You know, this is not the way our organization operates. And it is not what you can expect from us. You know, there was garbage, there were pictures of garbage outside of pallet shelters. I mean, we have everybody from the unhoused to little old ladies on Social Security coming to our agency during the day. We cannot allow, you know, those sorts of behaviors around those vulnerable folks, seniors, folks out of work. I mean, there's the number of folks. So in our regular programs, we serve over 5,000 people a year, individuals, unduplicated individuals. We're talking about 1 in 4, 1 in 5 in our area that we're helping. We value everybody's safety. We value making sure that's safe. That's going to include not leaving garbage or messes around. It's going to mean moving folks on when, you know, the hours are over. You know, this is something we take seriously. And I know there's been a lot of pushback because of the experience we've had, but I just ask you guys to look at the experience of what we as an agency have been involved in. Everything that we've been involved in has had very few problems. We've managed our own funding. We've not been a burden, but a help to our community.
Okay, and then there's that scratchiness again. Why would you not choose to possibly utilize the 99 site that's already got a lot of the infrastructure in place, instead of, according to what you had stated when you were on the Beeper show, spending approximately somewhere in the neighborhood of $10,000 in infrastructure, electricity?
It's gone up from there.
I'm sure it has, but that's just the last number I heard. But why not just utilize the 99 site?
So there's a lot of concern about the distance from the downtown core, the danger of walking along Highway 99. It's the challenge is going to be, will somebody actually come to get warm if, you know, they're going out? There's that same concern with our agency. We're not, you know, in the downtown core, but we're closer than the 99 site is. You know, Mr. Sauerwein had, you know, made that offer early on and we considered it. And to be honest, having the power paid for by somebody else is appealing. The challenge is, I think it's also much too big for our needs. If I were really looking to do this, if we have more space, I think the most I would take would probably be somewhere between 50 and 20 units total, because I don't think we need more capacity that, and that's the size I believe we can manage effectively with the current volunteer base that we have. If you get too big and there's too many places where people are not visible, I think that creates challenges.
So to touch on a little bit with what we had previously happen within the city with the unmanaged camps. Did community sharing do anything to help with the absorbent amount of garbage and uncleanliness that was happening with the other camps? Or did you guys just kind of sit back and say, well, this is the city's problem?
Well, we're not a shelter provider, as I
Right.
mentioned. And, you know, we were not involved with that operation. When Carry It Forward was operating 99, we would work with them as far as food. but that's been about the extent. We do prevention. That's our primary focus. So warming shelters are about as far as we're wanting to venture into that realm at this point. Like I said, we have no money. This is not something we're doing to feather our pockets. I mean, as it is, I work 12 and 13-hour days every time we operated. So the easy thing would just be to say, well, gosh, nobody's going to do it, so we're not going to. I just don't think that's what our town deserves. And I think that it deserves us stepping up and trying to protect the most vulnerable folks in our town.
So if this were to pass hypothetically, and you were to get the structures on your property, that would then open you guys up for more grants at that point, right?
Oh, I don't know the answer to that. To be honest, the funding picture right now is so in question. I don't know if we'll keep our doors open or not. Just the funding freeze from the federal level would be enough money to close our doors in under a year. The value of food that goes through our agency alone is $900,000. So I think to suggest that, this could change grants or funding one way or another. Is it possible? Absolutely. Is it likely? Probably no. I think most of the funding is going to be around full-time sheltering. But is there possible monies available for warming? You bet. During COVID there was. So I don't want any misunderstandings, but I don't want it to sound like this is something that's really going to help our bottom line at all. If anything, all it will see, our grants are based on reimbursement. And so the best case scenario is that we actually receive the monies that we spent. Most programs have a matching requirement and they only pay a certain percentage of administrative costs. So usually programs are actually a net loss. That's why we grant write and fundraise so much, because we have to make up the difference between what we're getting in that funding and our actual expenses. And if you're ever bored and want to look at some massive spreadsheets, I would be thrilled to show you the complexity of my world.
With grants being stated, and you had mentioned other organizations like St. Vincent de Paul. One of my hesitations is you guys setting up this warming shelter and then having a group like St. Vincent de Paul or whatever, and come in and basically bolster what you already have going on and it get bigger. Because as a city manager had stated on the Beeper show earlier, once it's on your property, we're kind of limited on what kind of restrictions we can kind of put in force because it's your private property.
So can I stop you there? So as I mentioned, we will be doing a warming shelter. We're asking to make it easier with the pallets, but if I have to do it in the office, we'll do that. If I have to buy a big military style tent, I believe that we are an outright permitted use under this. And I suppose we can get into wrangling over that. I'm hoping that we can look for what's best for our community and what will make it easiest for all of us to actually operate. But I think if you follow this, and I think if you look at our zone, that we are able to do this program. So if you want to ask for some guarantees, I'm certain we can come to some agreements, because I certainly want a well-run and safe environment. But I don't mean to be rude or disrespectful. But at the same time, this is our effort to try to make this permanent and ongoing, that we're doing out of our goodness.
So with the in the legislature right now, Governor Kotex is looking at pushing House Bill 3644, which is a shelter
I heard about it
act,
today.
which would allow for a lot more money to organizations as yours, with these shelters set up. Is that kind of why the timing of this is happening now? Because I know with,
We've already activated what I think may be all of the times this year. So the weather right now is looking warm for weeks going forward. So no, I don't see this. In fact, to be honest, I don't think we'll get this in place by the time the season's over at this point. So no, we're looking at the future. We're looking at, how do we put something in for next season so that, as I was mentioned to Cameron before the meeting, 3 of the 4 years we've operated, at the last minute, we were trying to throw together something because the other group wasn't able to do it. And so it was COVID in the first year. The second year, we knew we were doing it. The third year, it was, well, gosh, they don't have enough insurance. And so we're going to jump in and help. And this year's the same thing. Basically, we're just trying to fill a void. This is not, I don't know how to explain without showing you our contracts and our budgets. Programs by themselves are not a cash cow. And the only exception to that was during COVID, when some of those programs actually had 100% reimbursement. But in all the 14 years I've operated, that is the only time I've ever seen 100% reimbursement. Usually it's a 15% match, and it's anywhere from a 1 to a 15% administrative cost. So these programs are not cash cows by any means. Do they help support your ability to do it? Yes. But they are not. So as far as that House bill goes, no, I don't see us getting any funding from it. That being said, I don't know the future.
so just one last thing real quick, and then I'll finish my end. Based off of your comments, this is gonna happen no matter what, whether or not you get the pallet shelters or not. And this is going to be a permanent warming / cooling shelter facility, basically.
Right.
Thank you. That's it for me. Thank you.
Mr. Black, I do have concerns that you didn't go out into the community at least to try to mitigate any concerns. Quiet, please, please. And because I think that especially after everything the city has went through with the situations that we've dealt with the homelessness issue, that should have been first and foremost. And with that said, I want to thank you for bringing up that this is not an emergency at this point, because you cannot put the pallet shelters in place during the cold weather right now. It's going to take some time.
We'll see.
And hold one moment, please. And so I would suggest that council does have a lot of work to do on this issue. And I would suggest that no decision is made this evening. I think that we need to take this into our goal setting session and decide on what can be done with our pallet shelters. And since they are the property of Cottage Grove. And one more thing, since you did bring up that there has been no issues since activating the warming shelter, I would actually like to hear from the police chief, because I've heard through citizens that there's been some problems at the hospital. Is that correct, Chief?
Yeah, Mayor, thank you. There's been issues around the area and in the last week, and I've had some citizens reach out to me as well. Had a conversation with a gentleman in the lobby of the police department just today who was asking some questions just about activity in the area. So our police department has seen an uptick in activity, not necessarily at community sharing, but right next door at the hospital. And just within the last week, we have seen more illegal camping, littering, theft, and burglary and vandalism adjacent to those, right adjacent to community sharing. The hospital being one that we responded to just last week. Myself and several other officers spent an hour there. There was significant damage inside, broken windows, some very hazardous conditions inside there with cooking setups that were just not safe for indoors, extensive damage to the building, entered and exited multiple times over about what the caretaker had estimated, probably a 2 to 3 week period. Illegal camping in the area of Mount David now, and there's a structure in a vacant lot just adjacent to the hospital right across there on M. So just north of Birch, kind of between where Cottonwood and Dogwood are there. There's a vacant lot there where there was a burglary into that structure. There was a makeshift stove of some sort in there that was concerning. It was called in by a neighbor that saw some smoke coming from there. So there's just a couple of examples of just over the last few weeks what we've seen right there in the immediate area. So there has been what we've seen and what my staff is telling me, and this is just the stuff that I can remember off the top of my head, that we've seen just in the last probably 4 to 6 weeks in that area.
Thank you, Chief.
Yes.
I would also like to suggest that if this were to take place, which it sounds like Mr. Fleck is going to do this regardless of the pallet shelters or not, I would like to see us put some ordinances in place for the city of Cottage Grove, similar to what the Dalles has, where if any business has a clientele that is affecting the surrounding neighborhood, that it can be shut down. Because because there needs to be protections in both directions of, I understand, completely understand, but a neighborhood also needs to be protected as well if anything gets out of hand. So if we can get a consensus that we could look at this, then yes, and I will go to you, Counselor Settermeyer. Counselor Settermeyer.
You mentioned that we would cover this in our.
Counselor Settermeyer, we cannot hear you.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
We don't have sound. We'll come back to you. Counselor Mary Day.
So I want to thank you for bringing your proposal forward. I want to just share some personal experiences with my time as a volunteer with Beds for Freezing Nights. I was a volunteer pre-COVID and post-COVID. I missed the time that it was being operated at the Dairy Mart site. At the time I first became a volunteer, it operated alternately between the temperatures got below a certain criteria. Both of those sites are in neighborhoods. The Presbyterian Church is in my neighborhood, the next block. And I've been of both as a volunteer and as a neighbor of the site, I've never experienced any difficulty. The people that came were all local Cottage Grovers that I knew either through chance encounters in the city or from working in the shelter. So we never had a problem with a guest. Sometimes they would get a little agitated by whatever was going on in the earth, and maybe some left because they couldn't be inside, but never any violence or any trouble in the shelter or in the neighborhood to my awareness. And so the Beds for Freezing Nights was incorporated in 2008 in response to Major Egan freezing to death in the streets of Eugene, a combat veteran. And so that the Cottage Grove model was following that same pattern, is to provide a shelter on the coldest of nights for those in need. Is a as a way of preserving life. And it is my understanding that that's what you want to continue this long tradition in our community of doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And if, I guess I want to share with you, we have one client in this town. Who's an old guy, being a year older than I am, and has cancer, is walking around on a walker, and is incontinent. And the first night he came in, his pants were all wet, and he was absolutely freezing to death. It's hard to explain to folks. The behaviors are not the people. This is not, I don't support bad behaviors. I'm absolutely wanting to hold folks accountable for bad behaviors. I hold them accountable at our agency for bad behaviors. But, these are our neighbors. These folks are human beings who have their own challenges. And, this is important work that needs to be done in our town. I get that folks don't like the behaviors, but there are so many other folks that we will see homeless because of the price of housing if we don't keep working on that. And I commend you guys for, the project down Cleveland Way. I mean, we need to build housing desperately because rents are going through the roof, and this is only going to get worse as we go forward. And if we don't have any solutions, our problem is only going to get worse. I don't know what else to say to you all.
Counselor Sotomayor, can you speak yet?
Does this work?
Oh, yes, we can hear you.
Wonderful.
Oh, the volume's really low.
Okay, I'll try and talk a little louder.
There we go.
Thanks. I'm a little confused in that it sounds like what we talked about wanting a nonprofit or a church to come forward to take care of this situation is being offered. I have heard more complications talked about than I thought, concerns I can understand why there would be some. Perhaps is it something that would help if I understand that community sharing wants these pallet shelters given, but would it help people if this ended up being a yearly lease where people had an opportunity to give input, and if things are not going right, then they can get pulled?
Counselor Irvin.
Mayor, Council, thank you, Mr. Fleck, for being here. This is, I would echo, from how many years past, I remember thinking one of the reasons why I was really hesitant about what we were doing and against what we were doing as a city was because it was the city. And it wasn't the use of funds, the case I lay out, we don't get to choose whether we pay our property taxes. There's real consequences to that. And when we have to choose between supporting our family and things that we may not even ideologically or philosophically agree with, that creates real dissension. I agree, the right placed communities to do this work are organizations like yours, are churches and volunteers. And for those that are serving the needs of those who are on the verge of death, I commend you for that sacrifice and for putting your beliefs and your, to work. What I'm hearing is there's obvious concern of mission creep, of bleed over. And those are things that I don't think we're going to solve effectively tonight or come to some particular term where everyone's satisfied. I think this is something we need to think about. But as I've been thinking about it with the extremely limited time, I feel to think about it, that was one of my thoughts. If this were to go forward, how important is the ownership model of those? I'm inclined to, hold assets as long as possible and leverage them for the purposes of those that they're in the possession of for the time. So that would be something I would think I'd want to discuss with the council. I do perceive that there's not, like you said, we're kind of out of this warming phase. There's some infrastructure. I believe the shower is already there in an ownership model where we, as the city, retain it. So I'd be interested in exploring that. But I do want to make sure, that the concerns of the citizens and the neighbors are addressed. And I know you've been speaking to that in your time up here tonight. Those are obviously very, very big concerns and very, they're outlined, and we talked ad nauseum for years about them. But I would just state that I think that it is a valuable thing for people to be doing and needed to serve this local community as best as possible. I'm not exactly sure how to get there, but I do want to entertain the other mechanisms of protections that put the residents at ease. They can look and say, okay, I can trust that. I know that law enforcement is going to do these. These are right-sized ordinances, and that there's confidence is built up. I think what I'm noticing right now is we're not there. I'm glad that the mission is going forward, that people will still be served. Like to help in that effort where I can. But thank you for presenting it to us. I am thankful that it's spurring the conversation, and I do want to take it back to our
So I do appreciate your wanting to make sure that there aren't problems, and I get it. But I also have to look at, this is a significant investment for our agency. And if it's going to be gone next year, I'm now going to have to make that same investment somewhere else. And we just don't have that kind of money. And so I guess that's why I've asked for them to be given to us, just so that we're not putting in that money and then next year or a council in 2 years decides, no, we don't want you doing that. I've not wasted. Right now I'm looking around $16,000. And I just, I don't feel good about, like you, I'm very cautious when it comes to financial matters. And so if that means, going a different direction, I think I'd need to do that.
Can you speak to what impact that has? You talked about this is going to happen, but we didn't talk about timelines for that. And what a
I don't
decision like
know.
this
I mean,
impacts.
so I was going to try to get this in, but as it turns out, trying to get bids, trying to do excavation work that, when it's wet like this, there's probably just more challenges than I had originally hoped to get. I originally was looking at a big military style tent. In fact, we are partnering with Egan, who's willing to help us with some of that, expensive bucks and some of those things. But at the end of the day, when I started looking at the quality of the tents I was looking at for the amount, that is just not a long-term solution. And so when this changed from, okay, we're filling in this year to, oh, wait, we're going to make this a regular program, I wanted to make sure that whatever facility we put in place is going to last for some time. And so that's where I'm kind of thinking we need to regroup then and look at what's going to be the best. And to be honest, maybe there are better models out there. We're just exploring. I just know our office space is very narrow, very tight. And unfortunately, we have carpet everywhere, which means that we're now cleaning a great deal, where pallet shelters are so handy because literally you sweep them out, maybe you mop them out, and then you spray a disinfectant in them. They're much easier to operate than our current environment, which is why I'm coming to you guys. And I hope you guys also realize my coming to you is not my first choice. We've had a lot of history, you know, and I'm happy to move on. But at the end of the day, for me, anyway, I thought I was silenced. Yeah, at the end of the day, you know, I need to do what's best for our agency and for our clients, you know, and that's my goal, and the neighbors. I mean, I know there's this sense that this is going to get out of control, and I don't know how else to explain what we do and how we do it to you guys. I really appreciate your time. But yeah, I would not be willing to entertain.
Counselor Lammerman.
So there's no dates on your proposal.
I'm sorry.
There's no dates on your proposal. What's your tentative timeline for a yay or nay from council? Like, when would you need to have an answer?
Well, I'm actually getting bids as we speak. So I had actually hoped to try to get these in before the end of March. I only have one bid for excavation and one for electrical work. So typically under government contracting, you have to get 3. And so that would be the next step is that we're involved in right now is getting bids for that work.
I can tell you, I'm not comfortable with making a decision tonight on this. I think that we need to hash this out. I think this should be tied to ordinances, and I think council has a lot of work to do in this area to make the public feel comfortable as well.
When would our next meeting be?
When is our next?
Because I know we have a retreat at the beginning of the month.
March 8th is our retreat.
City council, the next city council meeting, I believe, is the Monday after the retreat.
Would that give enough time for us to talk and kind of solidify things?
I would think so. I would think we have a full day goal setting, so.
And can I also offer a tour to everybody? I would love you to come out, take a look at what I'm proposing. Look around and see what we do. I think that you'll be pretty surprised and impressed with what we do with, we're pretty frugal. We're a lean and mean fighting machine. And so I think I'd love an opportunity to share with you guys what it is we do. Because I think if you are able to watch and see what we do, I think you'd understand a little better of what I'm talking about.
I have one more question.
Sure.
Will this be eliminating the community garden?
No.
Okay.
No, if you come out to our site, there's a big blue shed, which was a Eagle Scout project. And then there's a brown kind of metal one behind it. We're going to move that brown shed over beside the blue one. The little pizza garden right there is going to get moved. But the rest of the garden will be in place, including the ADA one on the other side of the sidewalk. So 90% of what's there will remain.
Is everyone comfortable with a little more discussion on this? Yes. Counselor Merida.
Thank you, Mayor. I think it will roll right in with our overall discussion of our unhoused policies that we'll be discussing at the retreat.
Thank you. All right. Thank you, Mr. Flack.
Thank you.
To be added to the agenda, I see none. This is a time for citizen comment. The council will first take comments addressing items not listed on the agenda for a maximum of 30 minutes. The council will then take comments addressing action items on the agenda for a maximum of 30 minutes. Individual speakers must be recognized by the presiding officer, provide their name, identify whether they are city resident, and if so, their ward. Please limit comments to 3 minutes or less with council approval. Comments regarding any matter scheduled for a public hearing may be provided only during that hearing. The council will not make any decisions based on public comment. However, staff and council may choose to ask questions or comment following the conclusion of citizen comments. Art Lancaster.
Am I on?
You just step up to the mic. Art, thank you.
I've got a lot of things, but there's one thing that you brought up wherever you went. Egan. Don't mention that name around me. I know the man. I knew what he was. We don't want to be associated with him. Enough said. That is a real bad subject with me. I served with him. And I knew what he did. He was evil. And it hurts every time I hear his name. So please, we do not want that. I have a lot of questions. The cost I hear for those small and large tiny homes are, for the small ones, is 7,000 plus. For the large is 1,000 plus. I can't remember the exact numbers, but I know it was there. If we're not going to use them, I know darn good and well Cottage Grove could make money on those. There's plenty of places that would take them off our hands and help us with some finances. I don't want anybody to get them for free. They're ours. We could sell them to Eugene. There's so many places that would take those. And what's the cost to function this place? And who's going to pay for it? Definitely the city will lose money if we give them to them. Why do you need to move? The statement that 99 is a danger, didn't we cut a road through our street that's just about a block from the tiny houses? So walking up 99 is not an excuse anymore because they can walk up our street. They don't have to walk up Highway 99. Yeah, because I even know I wouldn't ride my bike down Highway 99. But heck, I'll cut through our street. I know my time's up, but there's still a lot of theft in this town. A lot of garbage left by the cars that are parking next to Safeway. There's a pile of garbage right now that was 3 days. That car sat there and left nasty rotten milk, everything laying on the street with all the bags and everything else.
Thank you, Art.
Sorry I went over.
Jennifer for us.
Ooh. Good evening, Mayor, City Council members and neighbors. My name is Jennifer Perez-Chartrand. As many of you know, I'm a licensed clinical social worker. 4 years ago, my dream came true of being able to open a private practice in this town that I love. In my work, I specialize in treating trauma. There's a story that needs to be told. I am one of only a few people in this town who have an understanding of some events that transpired over the past few years. In the aftermath of trauma with the lockdowns and mandates happening, our good city decided that something had to be done to address the homeless situation. Harriet Ford was hired to oversee the running of the 99 camp on city property. Many of us had great hopes that Harriet Ford would hold to their word and provide supportive services to people transitioning out of homelessness. When individuals are recovering from trauma, it's critical that they have people by their side who know their goals and can help them reclaim strength and resiliency within them. Father John Boyle, shower trailer volunteers, and others supporting folks on the street attempted to visit their friends and provide support during this transitional time inside. They were told they could not. I was informed that the only reason I could visit the grounds of the camp is because I carry my own liability insurance. When I attempted to collaborate with the staff, helping them understand mental illness and addiction so they could support people in moving forward with their goals, I was told by the supervisor that I was speaking to staff above their pay grade. It became apparent to me that the staff were expected to be nothing more than glorified babysitters, and their goal was not to help people recover their lives. The second piece of this tragedy is the dashed hope that people could be moved from the overflow camps to Highway 99 camp, but people were not being transitioned from the 99 camps, so spaces were not being opened up. The flip side of this was that there was absolutely no accountability for people staying in what became to be known as the Douglas and Dairy Mart camps, nor was there any motivation for people to move forward with rebuilding their lives. The camps became drug houses without walls, where sickness perpetuated. This could have been avoided. I too wanted to believe that human beings, when they were given a safe place to rest, would conduct themselves as noble citizens and maintain a camp of order and cleanliness. The reality is that without support and accountability, it's nearly impossible to break free from the trauma cycle. I know that we still have a mess to clean up, and most people here want to move forward from the trauma we've been through as a town. To summarize Abraham Lincoln, it's not the mistakes that we made, but how we learn from them. I would encourage this council and the good people of this town to not allow our mistakes to define us. I would encourage all of us here together to work together for the healing of this town, including our most vulnerable neighbors.
Thank you. Jeff Arkins.
Good evening, Mayor and distinguished council members and the chief. So here's what's going on. I think we should probably have the neighborhood canvassed where this is going to be and get input from the people that are around in that neighborhood. You certainly don't want to, I mean, Douglas Street is a great example. I mean, and here we're talking $1 million homes off of M Street up there and stuff, it's, you got to have some kind of a neighborhood input after the disaster on Douglas Street and the disaster at the Dairy Mart camps. I've got relatives that are continually getting hassled by the people that are camping over on the side streets of Safeway. They don't ride their scooters anymore, their little four-wheel drive scooters to Walmart anymore down the bike paths, simply because there's a lot of homeless that have decided they wanted to camp along there and hassle people. So, they may be out of sight to some extent, but our problems are still there. I just firmly believe that, here we go again. It's kind of like, what's going to go on, I guess it's going to happen whether or not y'all talk about it. It's more or less, so you're going to give them the pallets. I think, again, not giving them the pallet houses, let them lease them or something like that. But again, I think that Bert had a point. Sell them, get some money back and pay off some of the things we got going on in this town right now, and all the money that we spent on the homeless, electrical and just the cleanups and everything else. The people along Safeway, I mean, they're sitting there pooping in their places, and it's on the street, and where else are they going to go? They're sleeping in their cars. Safeway won't let them go in anymore. Matter of fact, they have things right now where you can't even get into the bathrooms without a code, just for the simple reason is they were taking baths in there and shaving their legs and their armpits. And, you know, I feel for the homeless, but you know, I think that they've burned too many bridges in this town. Just by, you know, I realize there's a lot of people that have the traumas and other things going on, but there's a lot of people that just will not help themselves. They're just basically, you know, hoping that somebody will give them something. Well, you know, we'll give them a leg up, you know, but certainly don't try to help them in any way to keep their lifestyle, you know. So that's kind of where I'm at. And I did time. Thanks.
Thank you. Bruce Kelch.
Before you start the timer, are we on agenda item 5A or 5B? Are we still talking about pallet shelters?
Yes, we're still on.
Because I signed up for both.
Yes, you're on
Okay.
both lists.
All right, just checking, just to make sure. So I can just add my experience with working with Beds for Freezing Nights for many years, both when they're at Catholic Church and the Presbyterian Church, and also the pallet shelters at Dairy Mart, and most recently at Community Sharing. The people that we served, generally speaking, overall, we're always grateful, thankful, and appreciative. And if you want to set out the goals of what a shelter is like and what the purpose of it is, it's to save lives. I think it's compassionate. It's understanding that when people are out in the bitter code, some people might die. And that's the purpose of trying to have something like this. So all the things that are discussed, I think you've got some issues that need to be identified. One is who do you want to have own the pallet shelters? That's one thing. I was there when they first were looked at by the city, and these are flat packs. The team that set them up had a lot of practice, of course, but they could do it in 25 minutes, which is pretty incredible. So these can be moved around. So don't forget that. And whoever owns them, you can pack them up and move them to emergency places if there's a fire upriver or not. So they're flexible. And the issue of ownership, I understand Mike's point, but it's also a matter of, is there a purpose of having another emergency place for the city? That's one of the things you can discuss as a council. Is it useful to have pallet shelters next to a very substantial food pantry in case of emergencies? That's one thing you can talk about. And in terms of the neighborhood, I think there has to be some consideration of what the impact is. When the warming shelter Beds for Freezing Nights was held at both the Catholic Church and the Our Lady of Perpetual Help, it didn't seem to be a neighborhood problem. And so I think you need to consider that. And I think times have changed. One of the big things that I will say is that there's change in the city's policies from having those two sites for everybody. Once those are disbanded, then you were able to get, people didn't want to leave. They didn't want to leave their stuff behind in those sites. And so once you took away a place for them to store their stuff, then it changed completely the dynamics of whether people would come to a shelter or not. And I think that's one of the distinctions that hasn't really been brought up that you need to be aware of. And so those are some thoughts that you need to have and consider as you hold your discussions, and I wish you well with that. But no, in the end, I'm in favor of having a warming shelter somewhere to prevent people from dying. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kelch. And I would like to do a quick comment on that. I don't know if you did talk to the neighbors around the Catholic Church and around the Presbyterian Church. I was sent video after video, and I know that there were issues. And so that's what this council needs to mitigate for both sides of the fence.
Take all those things into account. Thanks.
Thank you. Edward Chartrand.
Good evening, Mayor, council members, and members of the community who obviously care enough to be here. My name is Edward Chartrand. I'm coming here as a recovering meth addict, as well as recovering from many years of homelessness. Point being, we do recover. I've been clean since 10/21 of 2019. My life began in Cottage Grove, and I recently moved back. I hope to be a part of positive change in this community. I am here in support of community sharing and the request of the city to make use of some of the pallet shelters Cottage Grove already owns. to be used for emergencies on nights 29 degrees or below. This is absolutely needed in order to save lives of the most vulnerable, not only the homeless, but community members who may have been displaced from their homes for whatever reason. It's been 1 year now since I supported a friend in finding his friend's body during last year's ice storm. He had been dead for over 2 weeks. I am the last person to think that we should be supporting the destructive cycle of homelessness. In fact, I think we should be supporting the solution. The solution is recovery and holding people accountable to their higher self while working towards a healthy, self-sustained life. However, it is very hard to hold people accountable when immediate help is not available for someone reaching out for help. If we want our community to be healthy, we've got to learn to work together and start talking about this. Problems do not get solved sweeping them under the rug or pushing them out of sight. Nobody has all the right answers. I surely don't. But together, we can come up with positive solutions which will provide positive outcomes. I would like to talk more about this in the future. At this point, I really hope Cottage Grove will consider Community Sharing's request to use 13 pallet shelters for the use of 29 degree or below weather. I am very willing to volunteer to help move the shelters and set up as well. Thank you for taking the time to listen.
Thank you, Edward. Len Blackstone. The next one. Roberta West. Okay, thank you. Forgive me if I get this name wrong. Lise Colgan? Lise Colgan? It's Lisa? Okay. She's not here? All right. We'll move on. So now we're going on to action items. Art Lancaster. Edward Chartrand? No. All right. Dale Gangle.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, City Council, son. I live right there. I'm in Ward 1. I live right across the street from where they want this shelter. I have seen the damage they're doing now, the increase of traffic there, just for that shelter, just with community sharing there. There's a lot more people showing up there now, just the rumors of shelters coming in. It's crazy. There's needles up and down the street from time to time. I couldn't tell you. There's people in that hospital in the evenings. The hospital right there. We can see them through our windows. My neighbors and I, we're all getting frustrated. That little bench down there on M and Ash, or no, excuse me, Birch, M and Birch, there's always trash there, constantly. I live right there. I could literally throw a football to that camp he's trying to put in. I do not want to see it. I've seen enough damage around there. It's just unbelievable the mess these people leave behind. I've had to put security doors on my house now. I've got cameras on my house. Who's going to pay me back for all this stuff? This is getting to be ridiculous. Everybody in the neighborhood is starting to get scared. I actually had to put security cameras on my house because of this. When's this going to stop? How much more do we got to go through? This is really getting to be ridiculous. There's going to be lawsuits before long. And, I'm sorry, but this is bad. There's little kids in that neighborhood. We don't want our kids out there playing there. When's it going to quit? They got a shelter right down there on 99. They can use that. You've offered to let them use it. Why do they have to come into a residential neighborhood? Why do they have to come into the Cottage Grove to the Main Street down there? We got a storefronts down there. We don't need that. Like Flex says, he's got to fumigate every time they sleep in there. Do you think these store owners want them in there? Those are Mike's words. He's got to fumigate behind them. Enough is enough. Thank you.
Thank you. Edward Chartrand? No. Yes. Oh, sorry. Chris Wagner.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, City Council. Chris Wagner, I'm city resident, Ward 3. What I don't see in this proposal is any kind of vetting whether a person is low barrier or high barrier. But I do know this city has had a hell of an experience with low barrier the last 2 or 3 years. And I think everybody's sick of it. All the crime and the filth. We've had enough. We had to, city residents had to do something they should have never had to do. They had to recall city councilors to clean this up. And now we have a former city councilor who's trying to stick some of this back in. He already says, newspaper, we're running a low barrier shelter now. It's right here. So there's nothing in this proposal that says we're going to vet who comes in. So that can mean low barrier. If it was just high barrier, it'd be a whole different story. But this is low barrier. And your police chief just testified there's been an increase in goings on around that neighborhood, thanks to what's starting to happen. Now, Mike Fleck will probably ultimately, he's going to do what he's going to do, but you don't need to be a player in this game. You don't need to enable this. The city's enabled this enough in the past. So once you get if you give him those pallet shelters, you'll never get them back no matter what happens. And we're going to be in for another big damn fight over what's going to happen. So I just ask you, hang on to them, maybe find some high barrier people that need shelter somewhere. People living in their cars, trying to hold down a job would be a much more worthy use of that than a low barrier people that come down here to trash the place. So that's my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. And Andrew Bordeaux?
Good evening, everybody. I am a resident. I live right above the hospital. My backyard or my back porch oversees the whole hospital, all of the community sharing buildings and everything like that. I do have a 3-year-old daughter. The last thing I want her to see is a army tent set up in the backyard full of people who are probably using drugs back there. We finally just got rid of a trailer that's been there who is dumping their sewer and gray water into the city drain, which I am a plumber. I know what that smells like. I couldn't even take my daughter to ride her bike down the street because this trailer smells so bad from the other side of the street. I go out my back porch in the evening and you can see people roaming midnight, 3 in the morning, doesn't matter time of day. Another thing, St. Vincent getting involved here. They're going to try and expand. It's not just going to stay a warming shelter. It's going to be come live here, try and get a job, and then they're never going to leave. And then Fleck not being a shelter provider, they're a food and goods provider, shows they really don't know what they're doing when they're getting involved with this. So things are going to change. 15 to 20 units back there. I mean, we already got homeless people parking their cars there every single night, trashing the place. I tried to take my daughter to the park down there. I couldn't imagine going to that park when people were living inside that shelter. I mean, it's already getting trashed. You go there to sit on a bench and somebody's sleeping there with their bags under it. Another thing, let's see here. Another thing about the homeless up there, Mount David caught on fire 4 years ago. My in-laws lived on Cottonwood. Had a bum running to their house at 3 in the morning, knocking on the door that the hill's on fire. Okay, well, here's these units. When all that stuff lights up and all those houses burn, we can use those. We don't need to be giving them to people who don't have a job. There's applications everywhere that you can apply for. Let's see here. And I've already had homeless coming to my door, trying to talk me into giving them money. I have my 3-year-old daughter behind me, being a little girl playing. Here I am, 26 years old. I afford this house. I have a job. I worked hard. There is no reason why you can't go out there and get a job for yourself. There is plenty of opportunities out there. Another thing as well is cameras. I have cameras on my house now because I was getting packages stolen. Jonathan Gillivan, still remember the guy's name. He was a homeless guy in our town. Came on my front porch and stole it, and he ended up with 10 candles. So my wife was real happy about that. They probably got thrown in a ditch. But I just want to say, I don't agree with what they're trying to do. It's just going to bring everybody's home values down. We live in the newest development in Cottage Grove, and values are just going to crash. Thank you.
Thank you. Bobby Sales.
Hello, Bobby Sales, Ward 1. I can't really add much to what the gentleman before me have said, besides the fact that I have a daughter, my grandchildren live in that neighborhood as well. I don't feel that, just lately, more and more incidents have taken place to where, now I got to worry about their safety. And it's something when my daughter got the house, she never had to worry about or nothing. What a great neighborhood. Great neighbors. The people there are good. I really find it hard to accept that now, because of certain events, I've watched the neighborhood deteriorate. As far as people coming around, he mentioned knocking at his door, knocking at her door. Anyway, I don't feel right that now I got to worry about their safety and whatnot. And I appreciate the fact that you've taken the time to sit back and make a decision instead of making a quick decision to do this. So thank you.
Thank you. Steve Hoffman.
Hello, Mayor and City Council members. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on this issue. I'm not really going to add much more. I think most of my neighbors already said pretty much what they feel about what's going on in our neighborhood now, what it could look like. But I will say that I'm a little disappointed that we were not notified as the neighborhood what was possibly going to happen in our area. I thought that was kind of a bit of a cheap shot. We only found out on Saturday. And so I pulled up the information and read it, but it wasn't the best way to do it. I went down and talked to the chief today, tried to find out what kind of information that they have to show what kind of crime or theft or property damage has happened in our area. And I know that information is available. It just wasn't available today for me. But I hope the council looks at that because it's causing damage to our neighborhood. Vehicles, RVs just parked out, trash everywhere. And it's not exactly what we'd hoped for our neighborhood and the investment that we put into. So, thank you.
Thank you. Bill Christensen.
Oh, I'm Bill Christensen. I live at 1337 Elm Avenue. I live at the top of M Street in my development. So I was so pissed when I heard about this that I had my wife, I wrote it out. My wife made a flyer and I got a good friend and we walked the whole neighborhood up in Sunrise Estates and passed these out. And I'm telling you, people are pissed. So I would encourage you to think really hard about the people of Cottage Grove in Sunrise Estates above the hospital, that whole area. We canvassed that and almost to a person, people were really upset. And I mean really upset. So I'm just going to mention a few things here. An emergency shelter approved under this section, and I'm going to read off the parameters for an emergency shelter. They may provide on-site for its clients and at no cost to the clients, showering or bathing, storage for personal property, laundry facilities, service of food prepared on-site or off-site, recreational areas for children or pets, may include youth shelters, winter or warming shelters, day shelters, and family violence shelter homes. Now, I'm not saying that what community sharing is proposing includes all these things. But if they only include some of these things, let me tell you, when the word got out, when the word gets out, you're going to have homeless coming to Cottage Grove. I guarantee it. You're going to have the homeless in Eugene and up and down I-5, and they're going to slowly but surely make their way to Cottage Grove. And I'm just telling you, do one thing for the city. Don't allow him to have those pallet shelters. Just don't allow it. Stand your ground. To me, pallet shelters means permanent housing in my neighborhood in a location surrounded by single-family homes. Low barrier, this is what it means. Increased crime, lower property values, that hits me in my pocketbook. Garbage, drugs, that's what low barrier means. You know what? I trust the city council to do the right thing. And here's a good opportunity for you to get together and consider the thoughts and the ideas and the dreams of people in that immediate neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. Kathy Sales.
Hi, Kathleen Sells. And I just want to say, my daughter lives up there and she's single and she has 2 children. And she's had to go and try to get homeless people that are camping right next to her home. Nothing. So she calls the police officers and they tell her, they've done nothing wrong. We can't do anything for you. And so, you know, when you can't even get police to help you move homeless people, I don't know, 50 yards from her front door. And they live on the top of Mount David. And they have built a cabin up there. And they live in this cabin. And my daughter's complained about it. Her kids have actually been up there and seen it. And she's complained about it. Cops say there's nothing we can do about it. They're not hurting anything. But yet they live up there. It's garbage. There's things parked along the street. What are they? Cars, trucks, motorhomes. There's garbage. It's just a never-ending deal. It's never going to go away as long as we keep trying to do something about it. It's not our problem. We're sorry you're homeless. We hate it when you're cold. We got jobs. We have paychecks. We try to survive, and that's what you do. Instead of sitting in your tent, doing drugs and causing havoc to the city, to the people in the city, it's wrong. But no one wants to put their foot down. Well, I tell you, it's time we put our foot down and pay attention to the citizens of this town that do pay taxes, that do things right, because we get tired of getting shit on all the time by this homeless bullshit.
Robert Reitz.
Yes, yes, I have a contrapoint. Your Honor, members of City Council, my name is Robert Reitz. I reside at 1408 Cottonwood. I guess I'm within about 200 feet from community homes. And I think people here are getting mixed up considerably with the homeless versus the clientele that shares community sharing with the people that work there and whatever. I've had no problems whatsoever with that kind of thing that was explained today. Homeless, yes, we have a white elephant with the old hospital. That must be addressed. We have other problems up there. A lot of it with housed people. I know that for a fact. Lived there 10 years. Moved up to that area. Oh, heck, there were 6 or 7 houses there. And right now, there are probably about 56, 57 houses. So I've seen this. I know what's going on up there. Look out my window in my office, watch the street go by half the time. I just don't see that this will pose an unreasonable risk to public health and safety. I can't imagine community homes doing that. We do have a public health and safety problem. We cannot get local police to address a lot of it. That is a problem. They have their own problems. We don't rate that high on the agenda. But I've not observed any unreasonable risks to public health and safety by the ongoing work by community sharing, at least the last few years for sure. The city's pellet shelters are now mothballed and no immediate use is planned. To use just some of these for the shelters by community sharing makes a lot of sense. I think we should be grateful that some organization has stepped forward to supply beds for an emergency shelter for these unfortunate people to have a warm place to sleep on freezing and wet nights. I think it mean-spirited just to think otherwise when we go home to a nice warm place and a nice warm meal. I think that Beds for Freezing Nights, an organization that has dissolved, and there appears to be no obvious replacement other than this proposal by community sharing, excuse me. Despite information circulated in my neighborhood this last week, this current proposal is not about opening another homeless shelter. It's about having the emergency shelter that we professionally managed and open when needed. This is something we all need here. I encourage your support to that. I think that that's just the right thing to do by the people of Cottage Grove. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you.
Wish I was in a little better shape tonight.
Donald Berglund.
I just want to state, utilizing the warming huts in the community sharing initiatives is a valuable step towards supporting individuals during harsh weather conditions. But the concerns about the cleanliness and the pest control are valid. Here's a structured argument for the necessity along with a plan to address these concerns proactively. Importance of warming huts. Safety and well-being. Warming huts provide a safe place for vulnerable populations during extreme temperatures. They offer shelter from the cold, reducing the risk of hypothermia and frostbite. They facilitate access to warmth, which is essential for the health of those experiencing homelessness or situational distress during winter months. Community engagement. These huts serve as centers for community support, encouraging engagement and interaction among residents and fostering a sense of belonging and care. They can be hubs for distributing resources like clothing, food, and information. As far as addressing the concerns about cleanliness and pests, regular maintenance and cleanup, implement a strict routine for cleaning the warming huts, including daily inspections and maintenance to ensure they remain tidy and welcome. Enlist volunteers or partner with local organizations for scheduled cleanup days to foster community involvement and ownership of the space. And whoever did not raise their hand for volunteering, I'm ashamed of you. Waste management solutions. Install clearly marked and easily accessible trash and recycle bins near to encourage proper waste disposal, educate users about waste management practices and the importance of maintaining clean environments. Pest prevention strategies. Work with pest control professionals to establish preventative measures, including regular inspections and treatments to deter rodents and insects and ensure that people have a safe and clean place to live in. Community education and involvement. We could host informational sessions about the importance of maintaining huts, impact of littering on community health and safety involvement, creates a sense of responsibility among users. Encourage community members to act as stewards of the huts, reporting any issues promptly to ensure a clean and safe environment. In summary, we need for warming huts is critical for the safety and well-being of our community, especially during winter months. Addressing concerns about garbage and rodents can be managed through regular maintenance, effective waste management, pest control measures, and community engagement. That means community. By implementing these solutions, we can create a welcoming and safe space for all, ultimately enhancing community, unity, and support. And not to mention Most of these people, I went by there today and they woke up in puddles where they're at right now. I mean, that's just inhumane. And you guys taking people at the worst point in their lives and making it even harder on them to have to do this dust to dawn shit, you know, and it's not okay. I don't think it's okay. You guys need to figure something out because it's just, it ain't right. People are getting sick and if people die, you know, I feel like that's going to be on your guys' hands.
Chris Newton.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, Council. Thank you for your time for seeing me, letting me speak. My name is Chris Newton. I'm a resident of the Sunrise Estates community. As someone who lives there with a young daughter and fellow friends of the community, I'm highly concerned with it. First and foremost, safety for my family, my property. I recognize there's a need for a shelter like this. I would argue that there has been no clear path of communication with Mr. Fleck and his team, which is highly concerning. It seems as though they're trying to weasel their way in. And once they get their foot through the door, who knows what the limit is? Where's it in? Where does it go? The hospital's vacant. Does he take over the hospital? Does he get it gifted to him? My home currently has rodents. My home is brand new. My home is 3.5 years old. It's one of the higher value homes in the neighborhood. I worked very hard with my wife to have this home. I'm struggling with a rodent issue. I need about $5,000 of crawl space work because the rodents have got in there. My home is a 2020 home bought right after COVID, and it has rodents. It's concerning. That's one issue. I can deal with a pest. I can't replace a daughter. I can't replace a son. I can't replace myself. Would you guys want this in your neighborhood? Do you guys have children? Do you have grandchildren? Do you feel comfortable around mentally unstable folks who unfortunately are dealing with a drug addiction, who has got them where they landed? I chose not to do drugs in my life. I grew up in the inner city of Seattle. I've been around drugs. I've had friends who've gone down that path who are no longer here. I chose a different path. We chose a different path. It's very unfortunate that this issue still continues to exist. However, it's not our issue to solve all at once, and you're putting people of our community at risk by having the shelter there. Where do these folks go and how do they get there? They don't live in the shelter 24/7, 365. It's warming, right? They're traveling to and from. What are they doing when they travel to and from? Who transports them? They walk amongst our streets, devaluing our property, contaminating our streets. We've had multiple testimonies of soil definition, needles, issues that aren't being solved that are going to continue to happen. Why would we want that to come to where we live? Why would we not put that on 99 where it isn't in a residential area? I would strongly urge the rezoning. I'm highly concerned of Mr. Fleck's behavior with his passionate approach to this manner, not listening to the council's approach. He is arguably threatening to put in army tents instead of these shelters if you choose to gift them to him. I would highly urge you not to do this, and I'm very concerned. Thank you.
Ken Eady. Tom Castrava. Thank you. Sorry.
Hi there. I just a resident, a brand new resident, moved into Cottonwood about in December and bought the house. And now I hear about this, so I'm kind of concerned. So I'm just basically saying that that shelter should not be there. I have a small child at the home. Don't want him riding his bicycle around and getting involved in different things. So I'm totally against it. So that's all I got.
Thank you. Suzanne Reynolds.
Evening, Mayor, Council. Wow. My fight or flight's in gear, so you have to excuse a little bit of this nervousness. I'm seeing both sides of this. Being a resident of Cottage Grove my entire existence. end result is what we need to focus on, not what has happened. What we need to move forward beyond the hurt. I understand lots of people are angry, lots of people are hurt. That's human nature. It's not because of homelessness. It's not because of drug addiction. It's not because you're rich or you're famous. We all have human hearts. We all bleed the same color blood. The rats were here long before us, long before homelessness. City council members, no, not a city council, city workers informed me that the house that was torn down, y'all complain about the house, the camping facility or site on Douglas Street. Many of you are aware there was a 2-3-story house torn down there. When the people went in, the workers went in to demolish that house, prevention would have been key. They should have killed the rodents that were actively moving the walls. There were so many. But what did y'all do? What did they do? They tore the house down and let the rats go. Where do you expect them to go? They're down Main Street. They're in the restaurants. I haven't eaten in a restaurant on Main Street in 20 years. There wasn't homelessness here. I was broken in on 20 years ago. It was not a drug addict. It was not a homeless person. And I'm sorry, do not take offense at this. It was a police officer. Okay? People do things. People live life. People survive. Some people are like, but these pallet houses being placed anywhere. It doesn't matter. The homeless people are going to be here. People are going to have drug addictions. I'm not going to mention something, but I have evidence of something. And really upset that this person stood up here tonight and spoke about addiction, because addiction is addiction. It doesn't matter what it is. If it's food, if it's alcohol, if it's people will do what they need to do to get whatever it is that feeds their addiction, correct? This has nothing to do with homelessness and everything to do with human beings living life and doing what they have to do to survive. You go home to a house. I just used the restroom in here, and let me tell you, I'm not the one that didn't flush the toilet. And neither were any of the homeless people that are in here tonight.
Okay. Nick Johnson.
Good evening, resident of Ward 1. See a lot of my neighbors here, friends, close friends of mine. And I just want to make sure that I voice my opinion as well. I strongly oppose having this so close to our homes. I'm sure nobody else here would want that in their backyard. Just like Dale, I could probably throw a football over his house and into their into the proposed site. One thing I would like to say is that, you know, I understand, and I'm a very compassionate man. I really am. My ex-wife was homeless for quite a while and addicted to drugs and still is, which is part of why she's my ex-wife. Long story short, is there another place that you can put it? You know, other than in a nice neighborhood where we've taken a lot of time and energy and invested heavily into that neighborhood and try to keep it safe and clean and organized and all that. Yeah, that's really my main concern. I have kids. I've raised my kids there for the past 7 years. And I've seen a lot. I have a lot of stories there. I've actually had somebody break into my house. Yeah, who was on drugs. And I had 4 kids in that house at that time. And I had to defend my home, and I did. So I don't want any more trouble in my neighborhood. We have enough. Thank you.
Thank you. Johanna Z.
Yeah. Hi, Johanna Z, Ward 4. So a lot of great comments tonight, and I'm not sure how much more I have to add to that, except that my concern for you guys, 197.73 ORS is section 1F, right, where it says will not pose any unreasonable risk to public health or safety. It sounds like what we've heard tonight, that it actually will cause an unreasonable risk to public health and safety. So that would be on you guys if you are approving this shelter. And again, I'm not sure if you need to or not, but according to this statute that you would need to. So he can certainly get pallet shelters from anywhere. I'm sure Lane County would give him more pallet shelters if you guys don't give him pallet shelters. But again, what are we doing here? Everything we're doing is just maintaining this wheel, this cycle. We do have legislation that's going to be giving out plenty of grant money. I do see that he's offered case management here, and that's really what we need. We need individual case management because the solution is just not a one fix all, just getting a shelter and getting grant money and creating something. Having been spending 2.5 years doing outreach out there, knowing that everybody's case is very, very different. And a certain individual was brought up today that I believe I met this individual at the community center, and an elderly gentleman with a walker that had no place to go. And he was devastated because our community worker was not there. So he didn't know what to do. I believe the city's paid for him for a couple of nights. We are creating a state of dependency with these guys by the way we've been handling things in this community. And we need to do something different, something very, very different. So I encourage you, we have no crisis right now. There's no crisis. There's no emergency. Do what you're going to do. Meet in a couple of weeks and have that conversation about, how do we want to handle this? But we don't have to rush into things that all it's doing is maintaining the problem. Not everybody is going to these warming shelters. Some of the most vulnerable are out there still in the overnight site. And a few of us have been going out there and finding these folks who actually I wouldn't be surprised if we do lose them. They're not ones that would go. I say, there's a warming shelter. Yes, I do. I don't want to go. Right? So we're giving them the hats, the mittens, the gloves, the hand warmers, the long underwear, the socks, things like that, just to kind of not to support them in their lifestyle, but just to kind of get them through. But we need to do something we need to make sure every effort that we have is going to help them get out of this situation. Because again, this guy didn't know what to do. We've created this, right? That 5 stages to dependency. We've created this as a community. So and partly it's on us. Beyond personal responsibility, it's on us to do something different. You have a fire hazard. If you encourage people up there, everybody knows on Mount David, it's a big fire hazard. You encourage people to stay. Transportation there, and I've got 1 second left. The South Lane Wheels is done at 5 o'clock. The shelter opens at 7. What are people going to do for a couple hours if they're saying that there's transportation to there? So a lot of concerns for it, and I appreciate everything you guys are doing. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We have one more speaker and it's on an action item off the agenda, but an action item on the agenda, but I want to thank everyone for coming tonight and speaking your minds on what is going on in our city. And the only way we know is if you speak out. Bruce Kelsch.
Well, I hope this is a change of direction here a little bit. Bruce Kelch, I live at 78340 Haldeman Road. And I've been thinking about our city and our community. And I don't know if you're familiar with the Ford Family Foundation, Oregon by the Numbers. But I've been looking through it lately, and I also added to it some information from the US Census about Cottage Grove. So some of the important statistics are Lane County households, because this gives you Lane county by county information. There are 47% of households in our county are facing financial hardship. And Lane County is ranked 15th out of Oregon's 36 counties with its 47%. That means that 15% of the people in our county, and it's probably a little bit higher in our town, are in poverty. 32% are below ALICE. Analysis is asset limited, income constrained. That's from the ALICE research group supported by United Way. That is households that earn enough money to not qualify as poor, but do not earn enough money for the basics in their community, such as housing, utilities, childcare, food, transportation, healthcare, taxes, technology, and miscellaneous expenses, often called the working poor. About half the people in this county, and probably more in Cottage Grove, do not have $500 in reserves for an emergency car repair or health crisis. 10% of the people in our county are uninsured, 25% are on Medicaid. And with the changing federal regulations, that's going to put people in real risk. What that means is that people are vulnerable, that half our population here, our neighbors, are susceptible to becoming unhoused when one crisis comes along, whether it's a car expense, a unexpected medical expense, something that if they don't have no reserves, and with rising rents and impossible conditions on which to buy a home for themselves and keep it up, this places a large part of our population in Cottage Grove at risk. The median income in Oregon is 76,000. In Lane County, it's 65,000, about $11,000 less. In Cottage Grove, it's 60,000. So housing and good jobs are critical issues that the council will face. Economic development is absolutely needed to change things. It's great that the Sparrow Project is bringing in 70 new jobs, but Pac Tech just left with 70 jobs. You've got some real issues to face as a council, and I wish you well on that. I think that economic development has been on the list for council for a very, very long time and for our community. I think you have to really put in some good, well-paying jobs. And with that, you can really start to attack some of these issues, remembering that people are on the edge all the time and they need something to provide stability in terms of housing and in their incomes. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, this evening, there will be 2 public hearings. These proceedings are being recorded. I will now open the first public hearing at 8:58 p.m. This public hearing will be held for the purpose of taking comments regarding the sale of surplus real property, parcel number 2 of land partition 2024-P3226. Before we begin, the chair and counselors are required to disclose any conflicts of interest that we may have regarding the proposed sale. Does any counselor wish to declare an actual or potential conflict of interest in either of this matter? We will now have the staff report for Public Works Director, Mr. Stewart.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, Council. So on February 10th, 2025, the City Council approved Resolution 2161.
Please, can we have it quiet? Thank you.
While there's a little break, I just wondered if you wanted to extend by 30
Yes.
minutes.
Do we have a consensus to extend our meeting? We'll extend for another half hour. Absolutely. Hold that thought, Mr. Stewart.
It was not a Cottage Grove police officer.
Thank you for that.
I really want that. It's like, this is on the record and stuff. Please, then make sure.
And thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Can we punch it? Garbage rates.
Yeah, now we can rate increase.
You guys can use the rest.
Yeah.
Chief, you better be brief.
Oh, no, well, to say that there's no problems is absolutely not true.
I do.
Yes. Yes.
I think county land, counties want is the housing,
count-
the
the
authority
county
of
should do this,
county
yes.
development. County
Yes.
land. Yeah.
So this was all about, I want, a college shelter. Yeah. They're gonna get them. Oh, found general consensus. Obviously, nobody else. I didn't want my testimony, I heard all the. You know, what's really interesting, you know, when they did tear down.
You need to write only.
Wire. And it was funny, you didn't know. And we got it. And you know. And there, I think. Yes. So, I mean, be about that, so, here. I mean. Oh.
Oh, you talking about the rat?
That's big ass.
Kind of good right now.
So
it sounds kind of good right now.
It's awesome. Crazy. So that's so that's what they're proposing. It's starting. I think they're on the screen.
We're going to go back into our public hearing. We will now have a staff report from Public Works Director, Mr. Stewart.
Thank you, Mayor. So once again, on February 10th, 2025, the City Council approved Resolution 2161, declaring lot number 2 and lot number 3 of partition plat number 2024-P3226. That was recorded at the Lane County records as reception number 2024-03758. The city has received an offer to purchase lot number 2 of the partition plat from Hemlock Springs LLC for $560,000. Lot number 2 is a 4.01 acre parcel zone R2. Hemlock Springs LLC intends on building multifamily housing units on the parcel. The city council must hold a public hearing to consider the offer. The notice of the public hearing was advertised in the Chronicle on February 20th, 2025. It is now appropriate for the city council to hold the hearing. I would also share that we did receive one written correspondence or comment, which I believe is probably for this item and the following item from Mr. Blackstone, and it looks like he may be here to speak also. So I believe everybody's seen a copy of that correspondence.
We will now take public testimony. For all persons testifying, please state your name and address for the record. Mr. Blackstone?
Is this on? It is. Good evening. My name is Lynn Blackstone. I live at 2051 Bennett Creek Road, Cottage Grove. I own and manage the property at 609 East Main Street called the Bank Building, which rents offices, apartments, and is home to the new Thai on Main Street restaurant, Latino store, and Edward Jones. I believe you've been given a letter from me. My comments now are more personal. I wrote that letter because of a Sentinel newspaper article about this real estate development and Mayor Soulsby's appearance on KND's Beeper Show. She was asked a legitimate question. Is this the role of government? And in my opinion, her answer was excellent. Thank you, Mayor. Regarding this development, I'll be brief and to the point. I hope you approve the sale. But I'd like to take this time and ask you a bigger question because I think this is now a good time to begin to think more deeply about what is the role of city government in real estate. Finally, or frankly, in my younger adult years, I had a negative view of government. I believe unregulated capitalism was good and that corporate success would trickle down to the masses. I laughed out loud with a presidential candidate at the time when he mocked and said, and I quote, "The most terrifying words in the English language are, I'm from the government and I'm here to help." I no longer find this funny. Instead, I now understand how this
and the lies appealed to people's anger and financial insecurity, but in truth were self-serving, intentionally misleading, manipulative, and help lead us down a path where we're at today in our country. Good government is when we come together to work on a common goal. On a local level, we come together to build and fix streets and sewer systems, protect our neighbors from criminal behaviors, and educate our children, just to name a few. We do things together which we cannot do alone. I'm 72, and 7 years ago, I got my real estate license primarily to help my town. I chose real estate because I believe it is the tip of the spear when it comes to community development. Families need a place to live. Businesses need a place for jobs. When my wife and I were 65, we mortgaged our house to the hilt. We bought the biggest and ugliest building downtown at the time and gambled to renovate the bank building. During these last 7 years, I have worked hard at trying to bring jobs and development to our community. And candidly, I would say for the most part, I failed because I don't have, nor could I find, the financial resources to make it happen. Rural development is extremely difficult. Banks and investors have little interest in doing big projects in rural markets. If we're going to achieve economic health, it really is up to us. Other than the city, I don't know any person or entity who prioritizes the common good of our community and has the financial resources and willingness to do big real estate development like this. It is really up to you, our city leaders and staff. We need you to think big and act big, because once you take the big step and break it into small sizes, then you'll find that interest in more people. Take a large tract of land, like 50 or 100 or 150 acres, and break it into smaller parcels, like you've done here, and you'll have lots of interested developers and businesses like you have now. As you think about the future, please don't imprison yourself like I did with ideologies that dictate what government should and should not do. If we as a community need it done, there's nobody else to do it. And let me rephrase that. If we as a community need it done, there's nobody else to do it. And if it helps the common good, then do it. That's the meaning of community. I don't want to sound melodramatic, but I feel like our city government is about the only hope for economic development that we have for Cottage Grove. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions from council? No, I see none. I will now close this public hearing at 9:15. I will now open the second public hearing at 9:15. This public hearing will be held for the purpose of taking comments regarding sale of surplus real property parcel number 3 of land partition 2024-P3226. Before we begin, the chair and councilors are required to disclose any conflicts of interest that we have regarding this proposed sale. Does any councilor wish to declare an actual or potential conflict of interest in either of this matter? We will now have the staff report for Public Works Director, Mr. Stewart.
Thank you, Mayor. So once again, at the February 10th, 2025 City Council meeting, the council approved resolution 2161, which declared lot 2 and 3 of partition lot number 2024-P3266 as surplus. The city has received an offer to purchase lot number 3 of partition number 2024-P3226 from Hayden Homes LLC for $9,500 per lot. I'd like to ad lib here just for a second. There's somewhere between 136 to 153 lots that they've determined that are buildable on that 15.21 acres of lot number 3 as it presently is configured. The city is currently working with Lane County to complete the legal lot verification on partition. Once completed, 5 acres would be added to the parcel to achieve those lot count numbers. Hayden Homes intends to build a mix of single-family housing units on the purchased parcel. The city council must hold a public hearing to consider the offer. And the notice has been advertised in the Chronicle on February 20th, 2025. So it's now appropriate for the city council to hold a public hearing.
We will now take public testimony. For all persons testifying, please state your name and address for the record. Is there anyone that wishes to speak on this matter? I see none. Are there any questions from council? No? All right. I will now close the public hearing at 9:17 PM. All right. Consent agenda.
Approval.
We have a motion. So we have a second. We have a motion with a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimous. Resolutions and ordinances, we have none. And then we have a slight change to our agenda. We are going to start off with franchise basics with our city attorney. Sorry, Carrie.
Well, I'm torn between wanting to go really fast and making sure that we understand everything. You have an action item this evening that entails a solid waste franchise. And it occurred to us that we have a number of new counselors who might not know even what the bigger picture, what is a franchise? What are we doing here? So we decided to go through some franchise basics. Go ahead. So a franchise is an agreement between the city and usually a business that wants to provide a service to a particular geographic area within your city. It is an allowance by you to them to say, yep, you can provide this service, you can use our streets, you can use our, maybe other facilities within the city. As we'll see, there's a little bit of a quid pro quo to it. So next slide. I wanted to go through some of the standard terms you've approved, or this council or former councils have approved various franchise agreements. And usually what those have in common are they decide whether what you're granting is an ability to use an area of the city or provide services to an area of the city, and only they can provide it. That would be an exclusive franchise versus a non-exclusive franchise. You can use our streets, but we're going to let others who come to us and also offer decent terms to provide the same services, and you're going to have to compete in that area. Franchise agreements determine how long they can provide that service, and what can it renew? Is it only for 5 years? Is it 5 years with the opportunity to renew for, 4 successive terms? So a 20-year franchise. What is it that will revoke the franchise if they aren't meeting various standards of service, et cetera? The agreement will set when or if you can terminate, and what the process is for termination. How is the service going to be provided? It sets certain standards for the service so that you're ensuring that your citizens are going to receive this service in a way that, actually provides the service to them, doesn't add lots of complications or charge them for something that isn't of value. Can the franchisee, the person that you're agreeing, yes, you can provide this service, can it be transferred to others? Can it be assigned to others? That's going to be a term of the agreement, or it should be. Exceptions, what what's something like this service that others are able to provide without having to have a franchise with the city? That's usually a term in the franchise agreement. Rates, how much are your citizens going to be charged? And how are those rates going to be set? That's going to be relevant to your conversation this evening. And then fees, the quid pro quo part. So in exchange for using and potentially placing heavy equipment on your streets or in your rights of way, what fees are going to be paid to the city? And that's usually a percentage of their revenue stream, their rates that they're gathering from the citizens. Some of it comes to the city to reimburse the city for costs incurred. Next slide. Franchise types. So the kinds of franchises you may have already seen: telecom, telecommunications, other kinds of utilities, public transportation, and solid waste. Those are kind of the common franchises that you as a council consider and potentially approve. In some areas, solid waste franchises are just residential. You can collect just residential waste, solid waste, or commercial waste, or maybe both. Next slide. So your solid waste franchise is established by ordinance. It can just be an agreement that's approved and signed, or it can be adopted by ordinance. We're going to go through that ordinance quickly. It provides the framework for the proposed every other year rate increase. And I just want to let you know the rate increase doesn't necessarily have to come to you every other year. It just requires 60 days notice. But by tradition, this franchisee has come to you every other year for a rate increase. Next slide. So your definition section establishes that this solid waste franchise is for commercial and residential. So it defines solid waste as commercial and residential. So you know that you don't need two different franchises, one to handle commercial and one handle residential. Next slide. Public, and I'm so sorry, if anybody has questions, I'm whizzing through this, but trying to be comprehensive, please stop me and ask your questions if need be. So section 3 strikes me as a little interesting because it's adopted as a city ordinance. It sets public responsibilities that don't necessarily govern your franchisee. And so it is an area that could be modified at some point in the future to take that out and establish by city code how your what public responsibility there are with regard to solid waste, as opposed to what obligations does your franchisee have to the city and to you. Next slide. This franchise that we're considering tonight was granted in 1983. Everybody knows Garland. I know Garland. Burback, great guy and prior counselor and planning commissioner. The franchise that was granted in 1983 and is continuing through today is exclusive within your city limits. And that expands when property is annexed. So as property is annexed, the franchise boundaries increase. It continues, it's on a rolling 5-year term, which means that every September 1st, it extends again for another 5 years. So it never gets to the end of that 5-year term, which I found rather unique, but then discovered it actually is, at least the city of Crestwell has a similar franchise, solid waste franchise agreement. And termination, if you were ever to want to terminate, you would need to tell them prior to September 1st. And then there's another 4 years of that franchise before it actually is terminated, because you're catching it at the end of the first year of the 5-year term, and then it plays out for the term. Next slide. Section 7 of the current franchise agreement establishes the franchisees as opposed to the public's responsibilities. It sets some operational standards, and that is the section sub 6 of section 7. It sets the fee that is paid to the city based on the annual gross cash receipts is 3.5% that comes to the city. Next slide. Section 8 governs the suspension, modification, and revocation. Basically, if your franchisee fails to provide services or comply with the standards set in the previously discussed section, you could terminate, suspend, or modify. And that requires notice from the city to the franchisee, and then the franchisee has the opportunity to request a public hearing. Next slide. So the part that's really important for you tonight, and there is this ordinance in your packet of materials, you're probably going to want to look at section 11 because it talks about what does the city council get to consider when setting rates. And the rates are set by resolution. You have that resolution, I think, in your packet. But if you were to approve the request before you this evening, you will give direction to bring back a new resolution that will set those rates because we need to change the existing resolution. And when you're considering the request this evening, your ordinance says that you are to consider current and projected revenue to the franchisee, their equipment costs. They get reasonable returns. What's a reasonable return? Do they provide recycling and other services? And then there's also the catch-all factor, which is pretty much anything that you deem relevant. You get to ask for additional information if needed. As I mentioned before, they provided and always required to provide 60 days notice of the proposed increase with the supporting data. And then you can always request additional information. So that is the framework for franchises in general, and this one in particular.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any questions? No? Counselor Urban.
Thank you, Mayor. What are the circumstances where an exclusive franchise serves the community? What does it incentivize? 1983, obviously we entered in initially. I take it there's probably no other service providers willing to service a community of our size because you probably couldn't make the numbers work. That's my guess of what the situation
I
is.
was in high school, so I don't know.
But the overall question is, why do we have it? Does it still make sense? Are the conditions such that the community would be better served with another arrangement?
Yeah, so it's interesting. Another community must be going through this because a partner and I were discussing why would a community want an exclusive franchise as opposed to a non-exclusive franchise? Or at least why would a community renew an existing franchise without surveying the market to see what else might be out there, what other rates might be out there? And I think it just comes down to a policy choice. There may in 1983 have been a desire to support a local business as opposed to wanting to incentivize national companies from coming in. And I have to tell you that pretty much all of the solid waste providers are now nationwide. So if a local provider is important to, or was important to the council at the time, maybe that was one of the thoughts behind entering into these terms. I think minimizing the number of garbage trucks on your streets is an incentive for maintaining exclusive franchises, so that you're both not having traffic jams with various collectors, and you're also minimizing the impact to the streets, the weight on it as well. But of course, there's always the desire to make sure your citizens are getting the best service for the best price, and wanting to survey the market at least to find out does anybody now want to extend down to Cottage Grove? Maybe they didn't in 83 and maybe they do now, which I don't think we have answers to those questions, but they might be questions that you as a council want to think about. All of those, that's the kind of the pros and cons that I could come up with on exclusive versus non-exclusive.
Thank you. Any other questions? Counselor Mary Day.
Just some input on that. I understand that Florence attempted to have two carriers in a competitive sense to see if they could get a better rate, and it found out that neither could make a living doing it. So they bowed out. one of the companies bowed out, but for a while they had two competing garbage companies, and it just wasn't big enough a market to make it work. And I feel sure that our community is probably in that scale as well.
Anyone else? Thank you. Okay. Moving on. Item A. Oh, yes. Yes, thank you. Do we have council consensus extend for another 30? Okay. All right. Item A, Cottage Grove garbage service rate increase request. Mr. Sauerwein.
Well, good evening, Your Honor, members of the council. At this time, call Tim Ivers, let Tim introduce himself from Cottage Grove Garbage.
Hi, my name's Tim Alverson. I'm with Cottage Grove Garbage Service. We've been the franchisee for the city of Cottage Grove for more than the past 42 years. And here in Cottage Grove, rate increase requests are by request of the hauler as opposed to by review of the city. So we've submitted rate increase, a 6.5% rate increase proposal. And it simply boils down to, you know, costs are just outpacing revenue. And obviously it's eroded our margin. I think I provided everybody with a P&L of our actual performance for 2024, our expected performance for 2025. And so I believe for 2025, our expected margins 5.4%, where we're seeing significant year-over-year cost increases in equipment, and a lot of the costs associated with owning equipment, maintenance, repairs, insuring. We've also incurred significant increase in personnel costs, and it just has become the nature of needing to be super competitive to retain and train and attract staff. So we pay better than union scale. We offer 100% employer paid medical, dental, vision, work clothing, and offer a super generous paid time off program to our staff. And these things are just driving cost. And that's the reason behind our request this year. So I think the last time we were here was 2 years ago. And prior to that, it was 51 months or 4 years and 3 months prior. So we try to be very conscientious about managing our cost. And unfortunately, most of those cost items are things that are beyond our control. You know, it's markets, the market conditions drive costs. So anyway, so that's it in a nutshell. So.
Any questions? Counselor Lammerman.
Madam Mayor, Council, quick question. Why 6.5%? Why not 7, 8?
Well,
9?
it's just the math, you know, it just brings us back up to an 11% margin. It's kind of the origin of that is my first year here in 2001. I sat down with Richard Myers and 3 of the councils. I think it was Lindsay Haskell, Doug Perkey, and Pat Patterson. And we kind of hammered out 11% as a reasonable rate of return. It's what the city of Eugene allows the haulers there, and they build their rates on an 11% margin. It's within 1 or 2 points of most communities that are franchised here in Oregon. So.
Anyone else? No. Counselor Irvin.
Yeah, can you speak more to the the comparisons? You know, not having any particular bend here, but you know, to justify the comments from Counselor Merryday, you know, is this a market that just couldn't be served? without
Well,
an
I,
executive?
and I know,
We are a little different. We've got-
Counselor Merryday pointed out Florence, and Florence is a really good comparison because it's similar in size to Cottage Grove population wise. City of Florence went with a licensing arrangement where they had two haulers. And at one point, I think both haulers went to the city and says, you know, we're done because we can't make a profit. You got two haulers trying to cover overhead and administrative cost. If you actually look at the city of Florence's current rates, they're significantly higher. The roll cart rates are than our proposed rates. And that was just kind of something that flowed out of this competitive arrangement in a small market. The city of Florence significantly raised the rates or allowed significant rate increases over, I think, a 3-year period to satisfy the two haulers, but one finally sold out to the other. So.
And then another question that's been swirling around is I'm trying to get a grasp on this clean lane impact is your business impacted or do you?
Well,
move-
we would have been, but back in November of 2013, we negotiated an arrangement with EcoSort to dispose of all the waste that we collect here in Cottage Grove for a significantly lower tipping fee than the county was charging at that time. That was, at that time, the county was charging $93 a ton. The Lane County Commissioners had already approved 2 additional rate increases, one effective July 1, 2024, that took it to 101 a ton. And then there is another increase that will occur on July 1, 2025 to 113 a ton. So by going to EcoSort, we saved the ratepayers $113,000 in 2024. That is, we reduced our costs by that amount, didn't have to come and ask for a rate increase, and we're expected to save $192,000 on tipping fees for 2025. So the roundabout answer is the clean lane project is not impacting us because we chose to not use the county, and the county was going to pay for that project, and they're planning to pay for that project through increased tipping fees at Short Mountain.
I was at one of those meetings with you with the county
Yes.
commissioners, and I want to commend you for finding other avenues to save us that impact because that really had me worried.
Well, we rolled the dice. I mean, I didn't know how the county was going to react because there's a component of the tipping fee called the system benefit fee that pays for all the transfer stations, the outreach, the waste reduction specialists. They said it was enforceable. If we hauled elsewhere, we would be responsible for paying that system benefit fee, which is over $50 a ton. But it obviously, as time passed, it was evident. I think the county concluded, I don't really know with certainty that that part of the code, Lane County Code, was unenforceable. So they kind of beat around the bush and complained. I know they went here to the city prior to Mike coming on after Richard left. And I think their concerns kind of fell on deaf ears. So, and we proceeded along and haven't had any issues. So.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Any other questions? No? Oh,
Makes me-
Counselor.
Where does our garbage go?
Pardon me.
Where does the non-recyclable garbage from the city of Cottage Grove go?
The non-recyclable garbage, it goes to EcoSort in Eugene. Everything goes to EcoSort, all the recyclables, all the municipal solid waste. Yep.
So it winds up in the same landfills or?
No, that facility is owned by Waste Connections. It's a publicly traded firm. They also own a landfill in Southern Oregon called Dry Creek Landfill, and all the waste that goes into EcoSort is trucked to Dry Creek Landfill.
Well, if there's no more questions, I'd entertain a motion.
Mayor? This is the direction.
I'm so sorry. If there was just consensus for staff to bring a resolution back reflecting whatever it is that you want. Whether it's, yes, staff, let's bring back to the council the proposal or something else.
Do we have a consensus on bringing back a proposal to? Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Tim.
You bet.
We'll bring back that resolution at your next council meeting.
Thank you
Okay,
very
thank you.
much. And I just realized we have Senator Cedric Hayden in the house tonight, and I want to recognize you. Thank you for being here. It has been. Oh. All right. Approval of purchase and sale agreement with Hemlock Springs LLC for surplus real property parcel number 2 of land partition 2024-P3226. Public Works Director, Mr. Stewart.
Thank you, Mayor. So the city council has held the public hearing regarding selling parcel number 2 of partition plat number 2024-P3226. That was recorded at the Lane County records as reception number 204-03758. Hemlock Springs LLC has offered to purchase the lot number 2. And it is a 4.01 acre parcel zoned R2. Hemlock Springs intends to build multifamily apartment housing units on the parcel, and it is appropriate for the city council to consider the offer. Attached is the offer, the letter of intent, and also a draft purchase and sale agreement, which was prepared by city legal counsel and has been approved by Hemlock Springs LLC. So upon conclusion of the discussion, city council could authorize the city manager to sign the relevant documents in support of the sale of parcel number 2 and to Hemlock Springs LLC, or the council could direct staff to do something different. So here to answer any questions.
Any questions? Councilor Urban.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. Grateful that we have this before us. This is pretty exciting. Many thanks to Public Works and Director Stewart for making these comes together and the rest of the staff that's worked on it. It is kind of momentous.
It is.
And so I just want to recognize that. And with that, I would move that the city council authorize the city manager to sign documents in support of the sale of this parcel 2 to Hemlock Springs LLC.
I'll second.
We have a motion with the second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimous. Item C, approval of purchase and sale agreement with Hayden Homes LLC for surplus real property parcel number 3 of land partition 2024-P3226. Public Works, Mr. Stewart.
Thanks, Mayor. So once again, the city council's held a public hearing to consider the sale of parcel number 3 to Hayden Homes LLC. They have offered to purchase lot number 3, which is a 15.21 acre parcel, for offering to pay $9,500 per lot. And at the present time, we believe that there's somewhere between 136 to 153 lots in total once we complete our land use work with Lane County, which would bring the parcel to 20.21 acres. Hayden Homes LLC intends to build a mix of single-family housing units on the parcel. I would share that the mix will be from affordable on up. As I've shared with the council, and I'm thankful our senator is here this evening. He was instrumental in helping us receive $3 million in infrastructure funding, which is supporting the development of these parcels. In that agreement with the state, we need to produce about 30% or more of the parcels need to meet the affordable threshold. So with this development, Hayden Homes intends to have a mix of housing which would meet 120% of the median income level to meet that affordable level. So with that, once again, upon the conclusion of the discussion from City Council, I would share that legal counsel is very close to completing a purchase sale agreement. She's made a few more tweaks to it, and I believe that the purchase sale agreement will reflect a per lot price instead of an actual total price. I can, I suppose, quickly hand out these maps to So just to explain the offer just a little bit more, they have offered to pay in increments in 3 phases. So I would share that the first phase would be the pink portion, and the second portion would be the green, and the last portion would be the kind of the tan or orangish colored lots. The green and pink under the purchase of the 15, the lot number 3 as it's configured today, those lots are essentially potential building parcels that they could do under phase 1 and 2, so they could pay the purchase those lots. They're offering to, I believe the pink is 48 or 49 lots, offering to put down 50,000 in non-refundable earnest money. And then once they do their 60-day due diligence, they would pay for the first portion of the phase, which is the pink lots. And then once they have the those to a certain development level, then they would proceed with the green. And then the final phase 3 would be that orangish tan colored. And that's the one where we are working with Lane County to complete the partition and lot reconfiguration that would make that complete that, and then make it the final phase for them to Hayden Homes to complete. So that might have been confusing, so I'm here to answer some questions.
Any questions? Counselor Merryday.
Thank you, Mayor. It's not so much a question about the division of the property, but as the logistics, since we don't have a completed sales agreement before us, what actions could we take tonight that would ensure this going forward?
So I do have a proposed motion. If you wanted to move forward with the terms that you understand this evening, and it would be, I move to approve the city's sale of parcel 3 to Hayden Homes for $9,500 a lot per the proposed phased approach, and authorize the city manager to sign a purchase and sale agreement to that effect, subject to city attorney review and approval. And then that kind of gives you the backstop of it'll be what I draft or very close to what I draft that reflects these terms.
Did you get all that, Counselor?
Or you could say so moved. There's always
Thank
so
you.
moved.
Oh, there we go.
But I want to see if I memorize it.
Oh, good.
Counselor Lammerman.
So does that reflect the 153 lots total? Is that a hard number?
No, and that's the issue. We need to leave that part a little in flux because each phase will be determined, the size of the phases are going to be determined as the partitions are finalized and recorded. And so if we have a per lot price, then you know it's somewhere.
The
what
range
was-
I have is 1,292,000 for the potential of 136 lots, and for 153 lots, it could maximize at 1,453,500.
With a swing of 161,500. Yeah.
Counselor Urban.
Well, I would make a motion for the council to consider. I move that the council approve the city's sale of parcel 3 to Hayden Homes for 9,500 per lot, according to the proposed phased approach, and to authorize the city manager to sign a purchase and sale agreement to that effect, and that those agreements would be subject to the city attorney's review and approval.
Motion, do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion with the second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimous. Concerns from council? Counselor Lammerman.
Madam Mayor, Council. So we heard a lot of information tonight in regards to the pallet shelters and community sharing. So in regards to that, we have a lot to think about in terms of trying to protect the neighborhood in that surrounding area. Because according to Mr. Fleck, the warming shelters are going to happen no matter what, whether or not we give them the shelters or not. What kind of struck a nerve for me was the level of disrespect that Mr. Fleck showed to the council, to the community members, when he said he didn't want to come here and speak to us. Basically, the only reason he did is because we had something he wanted, the pallet shelters. The moment he was done with this presentation, he got up and walked out the building. He didn't want to hear what the people out here had to say. That being said, I know we had talked about speaking about it and discussing it at the next meeting on the 10th of March. But I'd like to make a motion to vote on his proposal tonight.
The motion would probably be what you move, whether it's deny one or two of the requests.
Okay.
You could either ask everybody to discuss it further tonight, but if you want to make a motion, make the motion.
Okay, well, I'd like to make a motion that we reject Community Sharing's proposal to donate or give the pallet shelters. So I'd like to vote no on the proposal.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? We have a motion with a second. All those in favor of? Oh, Jim? Counselor Settlemyer?
If somebody has, I mean.
Counselor
if we-
Settlemyer, we cannot hear you.
Can you hear me now? Oh, my goodness. Can you hear me now? Still nothing. Can you hear me now?
Yes, just speak up if you can, Counselor.
Certainly. I hope we
There we go.
don't rush into any kind of action without doing the talking. I am not trying to say that I favor somebody's attitude or something in this. I still go back to conversations that said warming shelters need to be done. And there's still opportunities to sort through things, I hope, before going on. I heard a lot of people speak negatively about what was going to happen when a shelter, and I think that something needs to be investigated if we somehow can assure that this is only a warming shelter, if that would impact the community the same way, and perhaps something we can do with this can make it where it is palatable to anybody involved. So I hope that we can follow through with our discussions, with sorting through things, perhaps having a community a community meeting regarding this. I just think I don't see a whole lot of other groups stepping forward to give us a warming shelter.
Right, thank you. We have a motion with a second on the table. And so a yay vote would be a no on giving to community sharing. So again, a yay vote is a no. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Counselor Mary Day.
So I do again feel that we would do best to discuss this in our retreat, and instead of closing the door directly now, that we did, I think, concede to talk about it during the retreat. That was our intent. So that is what I would like to support.
Thank you. We have a motion on the table with a second. Counselor Rubin.
So that, I feel like I have enough information to make a decision right now, but it does make me, I want to, I mean, I get it, but I want to be mindful of the impact of rash decision. I've been on the other side of kind of what I would call a rushed vote. I know how it felt. I didn't like it, but I sat there for 6 years. And so I'm, like I said, I'm prepared to vote, but I do want to have robust conversation about it. I think the issue that we're voting on is myopic compared to the greater issue. So that's why I'd be okay with voting right now on it, because I think it is a poignant issue, but I look forward to the broader discussion. I just want to say that before we vote. Remind me of what a vote means right now.
So
The motion is to,
motion to deny would be aye. To deny it to community sharing. Counselor Lammerman.
I'd just like to touch on one thing. It's not necessarily a rash vote. For me, Mr. Fleck could not fully solidify a good basis for us to donate these shelters. He couldn't solidify that this was going to be purely an emergency warming shelter. He couldn't verify that this couldn't move on to something greater at any point. He elaborated to outside agencies coming in and helping, which to me, that means expansion. So that's why I feel strongly enough to make a a motion to vote on it now because he couldn't prove without a doubt that it wasn't going to turn into what everybody has a fear of.
The at this point statement. Well, we have a motion with a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries 5-2. Any more concerns of council? Counselor Settlemeyer.
So does this mean that we are going to still talk about possibilities of supporting some kind of warming shelter during our meeting in March?
We can talk about anything we choose at our goal setting. Absolutely. Counselor Mary Day.
So I too listened with open heart and mind to all the concerns of our community and resonate well with me that we do have to put our citizens and their safety and well-being foremost and first, we also have to, I think, as human beings, offer the compassion to those in times of hardship when the temperatures are freezing. So I'm hoping that we'll be able to find together a solution to continue the long tradition that has continued in our community of providing a place for freezing nights. I want to report back from the Lane Workforce Council. We had our
Counselor Mary Day, can I
yes.
pause you? Can we have a consensus to continue a few more minutes? Okay, thank you. Go ahead and continue.
Yes, so we received the annual report from the Lane Workforce Council, and just to bring you up to speed on what they do, this is manage the money that comes through the Department of Labor to help integrate people into the workforce. So they offer training, they offer support. One of the more successful programs they've been offering is Building a Better Future, where they're re-innovating the trades through the high schools by building tiny homes and shelters on contract for the Square One, not the Opportunity Village has been one of the big recipients, and high school students are learning usable trades. Local contractor Kyle Kishen has been one of these instructors for the Crow Lorraine School District. They also displace workers, and when they provide trainings, retooling, support. There's a new nursing program going through, I want to keep saying Northwest Christian, but it's Bushnell. To do the bachelor in nursing in a 1-year time. If you have an existing college degree, this would fill a huge workforce need. In total, they've served 18,271 displaced workers, ranging from rural veterans, formerly incarcerated with disabilities, and low-income participants. And we also met with the Cottage Grove Community Development Corporation. Both Councilor Wilson and I represent the city there. And we discussed at length both what we can do to stimulate business here and to cushion the blow of the downtown renovation projects.
Thank you. Anyone else? Counselor Wilson.
Speaking along the lines of the Community Development Corporation, one of the main concerns was from South Lane Wheels. With the one-way traffic configuration, very difficult for them to serve Main Street throughout the total length of the project, because they're either running into parking or running into the middle of the construction if they attempt to park. Since, so they're working on agreements with the businesses that are along the outside edges of that to utilize parking, their parking lots to load and offload their passengers, and they're hoping that will work for them, so they can continue to serve the community along that corridor. And they think they're going to be okay, but it's a challenge for them.
I know city staff is working with them as well. Thank you, Councilor Wilson. Anyone else? Councilor Irvin.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll reiterate my comments from Friday's agenda session. And I know it's well understood, but we need our city finances audited. We're well behind. We're moving on to 2 years, I think, without it. And I know, as Councilor Merida had mentioned, this was, a big topic in this last election. As far as, who does the audit, my understanding is, was it Jones and Roth that we've been working with for a good long time? They had staffing issues and we got backburnered. At least that's, the information I have. And so if we need to branch out, if we need to go with a firm that we haven't gone with or something, I don't understand how we can go so long without it. So we need to do that for transparency purposes. And beyond that discussion about just having it done, it was, I think the comments that I remember, I know we talked about it a little bit, but it was that it would not be a firm that typically does cities audits, but it would still be qualified to perform an audit, just so that there was more that we could point to say, look, this wasn't someone that's relying on their recurring revenue and business, but they have no skin in the game other than to just do this, do a good job. I think that's what I took away from that last election, is what was being discussed. So if those things are relevant and can be done, if it makes sense for meeting the standards that the state sets, then so be it. But like Councilor Merida said, we've been waiting quite a while to sit on that budget or the audit committee. And we did have a pretty productive meeting. So one of the assignments is the Lane Economic Committee meeting or meetings board. And there are kind of subcommittees that go off of that for the region. One of the document being the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy document. That's a 5-year document that is essentially a vehicle to access EDA funds. So Bohemia expansion, there's been Main Street being one of them, things that can do big things in our community. So we work on that together as a region. And so there's a Cascades West Economic Development District. I think it's Lane, Lynn, and Benton counties. And they get together and they, have a lot of stakeholders. I think there's like 57 people on the meeting today. And saying, does this document, serve us properly? And so it's been an interesting thing to be part of, because we turned over into a new administration, and this is a document that needs money from the federal government. And so there's a lot of language changes going on, and it's sparking robust conversation about what words mean and what we're trying to aim at and get. And I was encouraged today talking about one of the areas, because it spurred the conversation to refocus it. These meetings, in my estimation, are kind of hard to grasp. What is it we're doing? But today was a day where it was like, oh, we can think about this in terms of like measurable. So many of the goals were just things you couldn't measure. Like, we want to be more this. But we got to talk about like, what does infrastructure actually mean? So we're talking about issues like we don't have enough people certified to run a wastewater plant. And what are like Benton Community College used to have a program and then they don't. And then, but Portland, the nearest one is in Portland. So what can we do to bring programs like that back locally as much as possible to provide the workers that are needed to build infrastructure for resilience purposes. So we talked about the port. NOAA has a huge contract in Lincoln City, I believe, and they contribute massively to the economy, to the coastal economy. They're saying housing infrastructure to support that, right? So all of this stuff matters. So I would say for the first time in a long time, I really felt like what we're putting into the document might actually drive things that have economic impact. And since we're an economic district, it's like we should be measuring the economic impact of everything that we do. So that's my update on the CWED. We're going to meet again next week because we really need to finalize this quickly, and there's a lot of language change. I'll keep you apprised as how that goes. Thanks.
Thank you. Counselor Sotomayor, did you have something? Okay. I just want quickly, I feel like we need to calm the fears of the citizens because it sounds like Mr. Fleck is going to be moving forward, and obviously that neighborhood is very concerned. So I'd like to see us explore some ordinances that can protect the neighborhood. So I would like us to reach out to Mayor Mays and the city manager of the Dalles, who dealt with this issue before, and see if we can craft a similar ordinance that will protect that neighborhood. And if there are no problems, then there will be nothing to enforce. So that I think would be a good thing. So, Counselor Sotomayor.
As we proceed with that, I hope that we can also get a feel for police calls in the city by region and have it be related to timeline of before freezing nights open this winter compared to after freezing nights were done, before we see if indeed there's any correlation at all between what is going on. When we dealt with roughly at the most 15 people per day, and we know that there's lots more than that many that are unhoused. And so if it's an unhoused problem, that's one thing. If there's a correlation with a warming shelter being opened, that's a different thing. And I'd like to somehow get police data to see if there is such a correlation.
Thank you. All right, business from the city manager.
Good evening, Your Honor, members of the council. The hour is late and I want to give the police department report the bandwidth it deserves. So my suggestion is that we hold this off for a future meeting, unless there's any objections, Chief.
Mr. Sarwan, if I could just add something real quick. I know we have the workshop coming up and we don't have a council meeting before that council workshop. So if I could suggest that maybe just a quick introduction of the actual document so we could pass this out to the mayor and the council to give them a chance to review that. So because I think at the workshop, this might be a topic of discussion. So just if we could introduce it and that's it. And then, yeah, we can do the presentation in a meeting at a later date. That way the community can hear the presentation. That would be great. So
We appreciate that, Chief. Thank you.
thank you, Mayor.
Report from the city manager.
Yep. I have two, excuse me, Councilmember.
I was just wondering if the chief would care to give a couple quick highlights of something, or at least introduce the stranger I see over there?
Mayor, Councilor Merida, I can kind of give this real quick. I'll just give a quick introduction and we can go through this. So really, I know we talked about this in agenda session 2 on Friday. This is just building off, it's a continuation of what we did last year. So this was something that I wanted to do when I came here. It's something that I talked about during the interview process, was creating some transparency and sharing as much information as I could with the community by way of presenting information to all of you. And then also just looking at ways for us to be a little bit more data driven. Obviously, with some of the staffing challenges in the last year and a half, to do those things, to analyze the data and to pull the information, it takes resources and personnel to do that. It takes a lot of staff time. So we're not quite as comprehensive as I would like to see us as we move forward, but there's things that we can do. So, but as you look through this, it should look very similar to what we presented to you last year. And like I said, it's just a continuation of what 2024 looked like. And we'll continue to present data on the numbers of calls for service that we go to and kind of an idea of how we're spending our time. There's a few things of note in here on page 4 where it talks about the department budget. And this will be something that we can discuss in more detail during the workshop, but you'll see where the first 2 numbers are increasing year over year. But every number below that is shrinking. So what that means is that the cost continues to rise for us to do business. So while the numbers of personnel are going down, the cost for the personnel that we do have is still more than what it was 3 or 4 years ago. So I think that's something just, food for thought for the council to take a look at. But some things in here, just some quick highlights that I think you'll see is that our calls for service are going up. And that's more of a correlation to our staffing numbers being better than they were last year, because a lot of those are self-initiated calls for service. So those are things where our officers are being visible and being more proactive in the community. So when you see that, it doesn't necessarily mean a huge spike in crime, because calls for service come in from the public and they're also generated by the officers as self-initiated activity. When you go through the call types, you'll see that our dispatch numbers are up, but they look more in line with what 2022 was, because 23 was really that dip in our personnel and our staffing numbers. So, but as far as the crime stats, when you look at that, there's really nothing that jumps off the page that'll be extremely alarming to all of you. There's an increase in traffic enforcement. There's one of the things that I discussed last year. Unfortunately, that didn't correlate in fewer traffic crashes. So we're still looking at ways that we can impact that. So that may be a number that jumps off the page at you when you look at it. But the rest of it is all pretty straightforward. And so there's a lot of information in here that we share about our involvement in the community. We talk about some statistics with our dog, Canine Rip, and his handler Derek. And then we just, we go over our new hires and we go over our training hours and stuff. And so again, this is just so you all have a chance to review this before the workshop, and then we can go into greater detail and present this in greater detail at a future meeting.
Thank you, Chief.
Does that help?
Great.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Chief.
And wait, one last thing. So, and I'll say this multiple times. Sitting right here, she hates it when I do this, but this is her work product, by the way. So she's the one that puts this together. So there's ideas and things behind that, but she puts it all in here and organizes this and writes the content that's in here. So she does an amazing job. So yeah.
Thank you, Brooke, for making us look good.
Yeah.
We know who really runs the police department.
That is true.
I just have a couple of quick items that are related to the resignation of Bert Likens. First of all, as was indicated earlier, we have 3 priorities that we want to accomplish between now and the end of the fiscal year. We need to get the budget done. We need to get the 2022 and 2023 audits done. And we also are working on a water and sewer rate study. Now, we're hiring a outside consultant, actually two of them that are CPAs that work together. One of them has previously been the finance director for the city of Oak Ridge and the city of Canby, and the other was formerly the controller for the city of Redmond and for the finance director for the city of Hood River. These two folks have worked with a number of different cities, and so we will be hiring them to act essentially as our interim finance director. They will be responsible for the two top priorities, getting the budget done and also getting the two audits caught up by the end of this fiscal year. Bert has graciously agreed to continue working with Faye for the next couple of weeks so that we can get our water and sewer rate study done. So thank you to Bert, even you're not here anymore, for being willing to spend a couple more weeks getting that accomplished. But those are really our three big priorities that we need to get done between now and August, when we start into another fiscal year in July. So I'm hoping by then that we'll be able to also start looking at hiring a new full-time finance director. The reality is that there are cities in our state and neighboring states that have spent 9-12 months trying to hire a new finance director. There simply are not a lot of folks out there that have the qualifications for the position or are interested in having us steal them from another city. So we will attempt to do that, but we may be having this conversation this fall about switching from having an intern, having our own finance director to continue to contract for that position. One final item is part of our internal controls financially are that the city manager approves the bills that the city pays, but is not a signatory on the bank accounts. The mayor and the finance director are signatories on the bank accounts. Bert and I were talking with the folks at Banner Bank where our bank accounts are located. And what they suggested is, at least temporarily, that we switch to having the mayor and the city manager be the two signatories on the account because we need two signatures. So Banner Bank has asked that we have an actual motion from the city council to remove Bert from the city's bank account signatories and place the city manager as one of those signatories. So I would ask that you provide us with that motion so that we can maintain the internal controls as our bank recommends.
I'm so sorry. I'm just going to interject. Was the signatories adopted by resolution initially? That's my concern. It usually is.
I'm operating off of what our conversation with the bank, where the bank told us what they needed was a motion and a vote from the council.
So there may be a cleanup resolution coming through, depending on what Mindy and Mike discover.
Okay, that's great.
Counselor Urban?
Question, does there need to be in the motion, a temporary status for this until such time as we have a full-time finance director in the event that we do, or?
I would think, again, the internal controls of having the city manager approve the draws and then having two separate signatories, that's best practices. So to answer your question directly, yes, I think this would be a temporary, because once we have a full-time finance director back in, I think we would convert back to not having the city manager be a signatory on the accounts.
So yes.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that it needs to be in the motion. I think that's good background information for you, because we don't know how long this would need to be. And if you just say temporarily, that's gonna beg the question for the bank and maybe others of, do you have to keep doing this every meeting?
Okay. Well, I would make a motion so that checks can continue to get signed. We can stay in business, that the city, that we remove Bert Likens, the finance director, former finance director, from the signatory role with the bank and replace her with the city manager.
A second.
We have a motion with a second. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you, Your Honor.
Motion carries.
That would conclude my report.
Report from the city attorney.
Very briefly. So we've heard a lot tonight. Thanks for the opportunity to present the franchise information. I hadn't done that before, and that was fun. My understanding, my directions are to take the draft off the purchase and sale agreement for the parcel 2 purchase and sale agreement approved this evening. I will be finalizing the purchase and sale agreement for the parcel 3. It will just know that it's going to go to Hayden Homes first for review, and then we'll be finalizing it and sending it to the city manager for signature. So that's exciting to have all of that done. And just on a personal note, I've been practicing law in this vicinity since 1997, and Bert Likens was the city manager at the time in Junction City. And so she has basically held my hand every year of practicing law. It's a big deal that she's retiring, and I want to appreciate her. I'll miss her.
Thank you.
You know, I don't know whether I've ever told you guys this. I was in graduate school at U of O, and I went out to Junction City and interviewed the city manager and actually wrote a paper based on that interview with Bert Likens, who was the city manager at the time. So
It's great. She will be missed. All right, at 10:27, this meeting is adjourned.